Big titty goth girls at 45 frames per second.
Alloy drops off the battle bus in Sony's next partnership with Fortnite.
Ew. Oh boy, the in-betweens shit that we say, I just curse too, but you know what? Life goes on. The stuff that we say in the in-between when the intro is rolling
it's gold, people. Honestly, we can create a $50 a month Patreon tier, and you guys would get your content out of that.
All you get is that. You get the little interstitial that you don't normally get to hear.
But welcome, everybody. We're Triangle Square, the PlayStation podcast. This is Lucky episode 208. This is led by good old Brett Beck, and alongside me is Saul Bridges. And you can find out where to find us and other fun information towards the end of the episode. But we have a lot of cool stuff to go through this week. Stuff with Resident Evil, stuff with Fortnite, obviously, as you guys both heard of those in the intro, but also, stuff with Subnautica. So just stick around to the news segment, and we're going to get it started off right. Brett, you've been on vacation all week. We record early last week for last week's episode 207.
I have.
What have you been playing this week?
Almost exclusively Killzone Mercenary, but
I
also did finally nab that FIFA 15 Platinum while I was on vacation. Nothing like a good vacation Platinum.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I also started at the behest of one Richard, who you may know in the Discord as Radio Race. He so kindly shot me the money in order to buy it because, he's a big proponent of mobile gaming. And Saga Frontier, the Square Enix PS1 era RPG, it recently came to not only consoles but phone as well. And he said, if I shot you the money to try this game out and play it and beat it or whatever, would you? I said, yeah, I'll give it a try. And partially because I've never played the game, but I remember hearing about it. And I've seen stuff about it off and on. So I've been playing that on my phone. I'm decently far in. I don't necessarily know an hour count. It's hard. One thing I've never really thought about is since you use your phone throughout the whole day, It's a lot harder to gauge how long you spent playing a game on a phone for me. Partially because I'm not used to doing it, so being on my phone feels different. Whereas I can pretty roughly guesstimate that I spent about 2.5 hours playing Killzone Mercenary yesterday.
Yeah, I can see that because it all blends together.
But on phone, I genuinely don't know how long I played the game yesterday. If I had to really wager a guess, maybe 3 hours.
And what is this game called?
Saga Frontier. And it's Saga Frontier Remastered is the one I'm playing.
What kind of game is this?
It's a PS1 era turn-based RPG. It's got some interesting mechanic switch-ups, though. So, in a lot of RPGs, you carry with you your damage from each battle into the next battle. In this one, there's a bunch of different systems that come together. First of all, your party can go front or back, and you can stack them in different ways, which changes who they can hit and how they can hit them with certain moves. The real interesting thing within it, though, is so in a normal RPG, you take damage in a battle, you go into the next battle. Like, let's say Pokemon or Final Fantasy, whatever. You take your battle, and you battle, you take some damage, you go into the next battle. Your damage from the previous battle is still there unless you've done something to heal. In this one, after every battle, your person fully heals. But if they die within battle, they lose what's called an LP, which is a life point, which is separate from hit points.
Okay.
So every character has a set number of life points. And every time they die in battle, they lose a life point. And that carries across the entire party. And eventually, if they run out of life points before you can visit an inn, you just can't use them anymore. Okay. There's no way for you to heal them or bring them back with items. It's exclusively you have to go to an inn, rest, and then you have the ability to bring them back. So that's been kind of interesting. I don't think you level in the traditional sense. Like, you don't have a level, but you definitely gain stats from doing grinding. And interestingly enough, normal enemies level scale. So when you're going through the game, if you choose to grind and you go and look at normal enemies, they actually get harder the more you grind because the game accounts for that.
I hate games like that.
I both like it and hate it because I think it definitely makes the game more replayable or playable past the initial story. because it keeps the challenge. It's kind of like why games like Skyrim, initially I wasn't a huge fan of it, but there's something about the way Skyrim works where if every enemy just suddenly got super easy, by the time that you do everything the game has to offer, you would be blowing everything away in a power fantasy, which would be fun for a short period of time before it kind of got like, I'm destroying everything with one hit. This is no longer really that fun. Whereas instead, Skyrim will still let you get perks and whatnot that make you feel powerful, but they bring the enemy's bottom line up to where you're not destroying them in one hit, typically.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel like games like that, every time you try to progress through, it just feels like it's hit sponges. It's not bullet sponges. But
you're not entirely wrong, and it does feel like, I guess what makes it weird is where certain enemies it feels right, other enemies it feels wrong. It feels like, why can I not destroy a goblin in one hit?
Well, see, and I prefer where they take a area and base a level in each area, and that way you can know where you're heading in the right direction, or know when you're heading in the right direction, because stuff is killable but maybe challenging.
Yeah.
But then if you're heading in the wrong direction, they're just going to one shot you. And what's something really cool is. Oh man, I can't think of the name of it. Octopath did that kind of cool. Where it's like, I'm not really supposed to be here right now because these enemies are super strong.
Yeah. Now, I don't know because I didn't play enough RPGs in the PS1 era. I played plenty. It's where I got introduced to the genre. But was that a thing in those types of days? The reason I even say that is because I've always viewed that as more of an MMO trope, and not in a bad way, but MMOs were typically the thing of like, you'll know you're not supposed to be here because the enemies are just genuinely higher level than you. And the enemies don't change their level. You level up, and then you can finally work in this area.
It wasn't common, but it wasn't uncommon, because one of the big things that Final Fantasy VIII gets as backlash is the fact that it does that, because 6 and 7 did not.
Yeah, you're right.
There's no way to absolutely do something to obliterate the game like you can in 7 or 6 or any of them. I don't think any pre-8 Final Fantasy game things level with you. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been forever since
I don't think 9 levels with you either.
And I haven't played enough of 9 to know, but
9's more traditional.
It's been forever since I have played 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
So that there is just Game Boy Advance era of the last time I played those games.
So
and
I'll tell you something about this that I
remember.
think may slightly change your opinion. Again, slightly. I guess I should somewhat go back. Enemies don't level scale with you as much as the encounter as a whole scales with you. So a good example is like you run around in an overworld and you'll see the enemies and they bump into you, you load into a battle segment. You know what I mean? So what happens is the higher level you are, the more chance that every encounter is going to include multiple enemies that are of higher levels. So it's not like you see Little Green Man and Little Green Man's actually harder. The Green Man that you've always been fighting is actually pretty easy, and I can normally 1 or 2 hit them. Whereas if I go into the battle, and you have a chance to flee at the start of every battle, it'll say either start battle or flee. So if you see it and you're like, oh, this is too much for me right now, you can just back out from normal encounters at least. Of course, story ones you can't flee, but story ones don't scale in the same way.
Okay, that's a little different then, I think.
Story
to a degree.
Story ones, I think they still do scale to some degree, but they don't scale to a point of like, oh, you're supposed to beat this. It's almost like you can grind in order to pass the story, but you're not going to grind in order to pass side quests. Side quests are going to get harder, or going to stay as equally challenging as they would have from moment one, maybe even potentially harder, because now you're having to deal with enemies that have a much better moveset. So, whereas at the very beginning of the game, you can go into this bio research lab, and I got a party member out of it, but I ended up grinding in there on accident. By the time I was leaving, these scientists I'd run into, normally it was just them turning into creatures, and you just fight the one creature, maybe 2. By the time I was getting out of there was multiple creatures with huge ones that take, 8 turns to kill because I had been grinding. But there are new creatures in that encounter instead of it being that same little monsters. That same monster is easy to kill, but now there's 3 other ones that are much harder, whereas before it might have been 1 or 2 monsters max. So it's kind of a weird hit on that, but I think it works. I'm curious to see how the game goes off. It's got some kind of cool stuff, though. It's like you kind of morph into a hero suit, and at least my character, I'm playing as a Red, and he's got a transformation called the Alkaiser transformation that you can only hit when you're down to low HP or you're the only person in your party left. But it's kind of like a Hail Mary that lets you come back and completely restores all your health and you get new movesets out of it. But it almost looks like a Kingdom Hearts armor moment, where it's like you slap it on and you kind of got this armor with a little helmet with pointy things on it.
Yeah, I think I saw that when I was looking at the game.
Yeah.
Because I was looking to see if this is another, because it is Square Enix. And Square Enix has this really bad habit of this ugly remastering filter they put on games. And I mean filter in a very broad sense here, because the remastered character models for any game they've ever done is just garbage compared to the originals. They don't spruce up the originals. It's like they almost like put a weird 3D animated object in it and it just doesn't fit.
If you look at the original for this and you look at what they did,
it's
really close.
It is closer than normal, but
yes,
it's still
like Final Fantasy,
the little button eyes and everything, like with a little shiny dot in them.
Yeah, what is it? Final Fantasy 6 that has an Android remaster that's just hideous.
There's a lot of them with
it might be 3.
There's a lot of them with mobile remasters, and yes, that is it, and yes, it is ugly.
See, I don't know. That Alcázar transformation's cool though. It's a cool setup.
Yeah,
and it's a very interesting. I mean, the game's got a lot of interesting tech in it, and it does a lot of things that were. When did it come out originally? I think it's almost 20-something years old, if not already. So when did it originally come out? Because I think it does a lot of stuff that it came out in 97. Okay. And then came to North America in 98.
That's the perfect example of how these remasters work. And just make the pixel art more vivid. Don't just get rid of it or make it a blurry mess and kind of meld it all together to make what the character kind of looks like. To me, like, I don't like this design. I actually love pixel art.
There's definitely worse examples than that, but that's still not great.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the same as this, though. And when you remaster a game, not a remake, but when you remaster a game,
you're right, yeah,
and you change that much, to me, it's just, I would prefer it just to be cleaner pixels. Like, I really hope Nintendo does this thing, like where they do with like the mini SNES and NES, where they do like a Game Boy Advance or something, and then they have like Emerald, and they keep that same art style, but it's just more vivid, clean pixels.
You know what I really like is when games actually set up the idea of like, we are going to remaster it, and the remaster is going to include a new take on what we can do with this to some degree, but we're also always going to have the ability to play it with the way it originally looked. It's something that I could be wrong too, but I don't think it is. It's something that would have been cool in Demon's Souls remake too. Like, hey, if you want to play Demon's Souls looking exactly like it did, then you can.
Technically, you can. You could throw the old filter on.
But all that is like it changes the color grading and lighting of the game to look more like the original, which is something. But I think that, one of the things I always thought was really cool about
that's from the App Store. That's what Final Fantasy VI looks like on mobile from my phone. It's not the worst, but it's not the same.
It doesn't look like Final Fantasy VI at all to me.
Yeah, and Saga Frontier definitely does it better because the original art style kind of works.
I think the original art style is actually closer to this to begin with.
Yeah,
so
it's still a weird. It's like a clean texture, but it has no texture, if that makes sense, or it has no depth or anything. It's very interesting.
Yeah, whereas the actual original pixel art has got a lot of shading within it.
Yes.
It's where a lot of this they just use shadow.
It's just
not
bright.
Even on the thing, but just shadow around stuff. It's weird. It's different. What's kind of cool about Saga Frontier though, that I'll say, is I think it was doing a lot of interesting stuff that we're seeing kind of come back around now. It has like 8 different protagonists, or maybe 7 that you can play as, and every protagonist has a completely different storyline and how they intersect with each other to a degree. And I think that that's kind of cool because if you look, it's kind of like what you get out of like Octopath Traveler, and it's similar in the sense that most of the characters that you can play as, you meet in the game. So even though I'm playing as Red, I got almost all the party members you can get. I was going around traveling and seeing where I could find what, and I run into them, and you can go ahead and get them in your party. So it's kind of similar to the way that Octopath does it, where it's like you start as one character, and by the end of you going through, you're going to play every character's thing. And that's a little different because Octopath kind of switches the perspective. Like you actually play as the other character, whereas this, you interact with the other characters, but you're still in your own storyline. And if you want to play the other character's storyline, there's a lot more replayability because now you can go through and like, I'm going to play the whole game as Lute now and figure out what Lute's story is, and you get a different backstory. And it's kind of like the main story still somewhat ties together,
right?
But it's completely different because of the viewpoint of why they're doing what they're doing.
Whereas Octopath kind of did it all separately.
Yeah,
because you would experience all of their stories.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, it's similar but different, and I mean that seems like a pretty ambitious game for '97. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean you're not wrong. That's That's what I love. I was actually looking at it on my phone to see if you could actually get, or actually what the remaster looked like. But that's like Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger for, was it 94 or 95 that Chrono Trigger came out?
Yeah, Chrono Trigger did a lot of
that game had an amount of story depth that was unheard of in a game at that time. 95, yeah. So it's just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting. The one complaint I think I will have, and of course it doesn't really matter to me because Richard was nice enough to literally just send me it. Money for these remakes is really interesting.
Yeah, like
because this is $25, and if I'm being honest, I think that's a bit much.
So for me, it's all about the way that the game is preserved. See, it almost looks, the character model looks like a Game Boy Advance character model, but smooth.
Yeah, it does.
It's weird,
but it's interesting. It's like I said, it's doing well, and the way that you go through all these different things, it's fun. But I am stuck at the part right now where I just can't beat this boss. Different area than I was stuck, Richard, because I know I was talking to Richard about having some issues in one part. But I mean, it's a challenge that I'm okay with. Like I'm having a good time.
Yeah. For me though, this week I have not played a whole lot. Sunday night we recorded Saturday last week.
We recorded Saturday, and I immediately left after you left. I had to go drive for 7 hours.
Saturday night, I started back on Monster Hunter Rise after a couple-day break, and started the Gun Lance, which is one of my favorite weapons in the world, and have been playing through with that, and on and off all this week, and just climbing more and more in terms of like getting into 6-star missions and stuff like that, and grinding monsters to get cool armor and armor sets for it. So that's what I've been mainly playing. The other game that I tried out, because I bought it because I've heard all this good stuff about it, and that was Disco Elysium.
Oh yeah,
and I just did not enjoy it at all. It has this very classical but clunky control scheme where you control your character with the left stick, and there are items throughout every room you have to investigate with, but you have to use the right stick to highlight them. And you can stand in like the center of the room and highlight most of the objects around you if you're close enough. And then you have to press X, and your character will walk over there and investigate with them. But that doesn't work. Like, you have to press X, and then a little yellow X pops up on the ground, which is like, I can't tell if it's telling me to stand here to access it, because my character will walk 2 or 3 feet and then stop. And I don't know if it's a glitch. I don't know if it's just clunky. I don't know. And I was so thrown off because people were saying that, like, I'll give it this. People were saying that the writing was really good. And the writing is phenomenal, but there's too much of it. Like,
I've heard it's very dialogue heavy.
It is like playing, what is that game called that has like 3,000 lines of dialogue in it that you're surprised that it has? It's a dungeon crawler. Not Torchlight, not Diablo, not Divinity, Pillars of Eternity.
Oh yes,
it's like that, where
that game was super verbose. I was like, dude, get to the point.
I have a pet peeve of mine in a game when
that made me quit playing the game.
Well, this right here was kind of taxing, and it might have been that I wasn't in the right mindset already because I was having a bad time with the controls. But one of my biggest pet peeves in a video game is when I resume control of a character, walk or do something for less than 2 minutes, and then it's back into a cutscene of something. And I'm like, why give me back control? That's kind of how this game does a couple of the dialogue scenes, like where you have like an inner monologue going on with your head, and you have like D&D style skill checks that you could do to investigate, more of your mental health and past and stuff.
Yeah.
But that game just takes forever to get me to that point, because it's like I'm investigating this room, and then I'll start inner monologuing about something, and then I'll stop inner monologuing about it, and then I'll go try to investigate more, and then I'll start inner monologuing again. I'm like, why? Like, it's just going. But don't get me wrong, the quality of the writing and the voice acting is amazing. Like that in itself to me is like already a 10 out of 10. It's just the gameplay that carries you to those moments is something I'm not fond of.
Well, and it's no combat, which is really interesting for anybody who doesn't know this. And I'm not, don't get me wrong, I don't know a ton about the game, but what I hear from everybody constantly is that it's a very different type of game because it's not based around combat. It's almost like original point point and click adventure games where the goal isn't to kill things. It's kind of like puzzle solving and figuring out things together. Now, question for you. Excuse me, because I know you played it. So Day of the Tentacle Remastered.
Right. Platinum.
I guess I should say this. Let me go back. On Disco Elysium, am I understanding correctly? At least this is the way my brain's taking it. Whenever you walk into a room, you move the right analog stick, and almost like a radial, it'll just highlight something as you move it around.
Yeah.
Or is it more like Day of the Tentacle where you have like a hand and you drag that hand around? And okay,
it is more of a radial, and you have to move it into the direction of where the item is. Like, you can't just circle.
And you got to hold it too, probably, right? Or can you just move it and then...
I think you could just flick it over there and hit X to select it.
That's good, because if you had to hold it and then still try and hit another button to activate it, that would be a pain in the
I'm pretty
butt.
sure you could just highlight it and then hit X. But you have to be precise with it. Like, you can't just go in there and spam, like, spinning your analog stick around to select items.
Yeah.
You have to, like, go in there and look around and start hitting your analog stick in different directions to find these items first. Or at least that's how it is with me.
Okay.
But I put my complaint into Discord, and our good buddy Sean, aka Rucold, he said it should automatically walk you to the correct position if you are out of place, but the method you are using is the way I'm doing it. Definitely clunky and often doesn't always work every time, so hopefully there's more patches with a smoother ride. And then another one of our Discord buddies, SZ982, says it helps if you hold down the X button instead of just pressing it. I typically just walk up to it myself, click the right stick to highlight, and then hold down X. 99% of the times I have no issues. But there's nothing in the game that tells me to hold.
Yeah.
You're finding this all out on your own, and not saying that's like a bad thing about it, but I
think that's arguable. I mean,
I would have loved
you need to at least tell me how to play the game.
Yeah, and for something this in-depth, because this is a very, very in-depth game in terms of your character and your character sheet. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I've been playing this week. Nothing really new other than that. I did re-download Days Gone, and I did download Subnautica.
I re-downloaded Days Gone as well.
Did you really? Yeah, I re-downloaded it today, actually. I was sitting there, and we're going to get into it in a little bit, but one of the developers said something that kind of pissed me off, so we'll get into that. Maybe. I don't know if you have that in the news.
I don't, but we'll talk about it. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Though I think that the way this is and it's true of even what we talked about last week, the way things are reported definitely gives a bias to the way that you're supposed to take that information.
Right.
And as someone who watched the actual interview where the thing in question was said, if it is what I think it is, then I don't quite agree with the way that the article is presenting it.
And that's a problem in itself too. But it also could just be a problem in his message.
Could be,
His message could be fine, but the way he said it is what's off-putting.
Yeah. Now, it's interesting because you know about downloading Days Gone again, and of course I'm downloading Days Gone again, and this is. I mean this in more of a joking way than some people are probably going to try and take it, but I was already in this nostalgic PlayStation mood, right? Where I'm like, there's so many games that I love from old systems that I haven't played in a long time, and I get this way occasionally, and I'll just replay stuff. It's why I replayed Stick of Truth, and more recently replayed Fractured But Whole. There are games I really like that I'm like, I want to play it again, and that's why I got into the mood to play Nier Automata again. I was like, screw it, we're just going to do it.
Yeah.
I was playing Vita, and I'm like, man, the Vita is such a great handheld. I'm still so surprised by it today that it holds up as well as it does. And so I thought, well, let's play Killzone Mercenary. Of course, I started playing that, like I talked about. And I'm honestly on this kick where I think I'm going to keep playing my Vita a lot more. This sounds wild because I know that this is something I'm definitely afforded that others aren't. But I've got a PS5 day one, and I've not turned my PS5 on for anything other than to watch HBO Max in at least 3 weeks.
Well, it kind of goes back to that conversation I was having with Corey of like, are you a Souls fan? Then the PS5 is worth it. But other than that, like, I've been playing PS4 games. Like I occasionally play Breakpoint for a couple hours every week. I just don't mention it because
now, of course, playing the PS4 games on PS5 is a benefit because I'm going to replay Days Gone because it's been roughly 2 years.
And
I
there's
love
a
that
PS5
game.
patch for it.
But that game runs at 60 frames per second and 4K on PS5. So that's actually awesome.
That's a whole benefit for me. Reason for me to replay it.
But a big thing for me right now is honestly the games I'm debating between what to start next is like, do I start Unit 13 and play that with Chris on Vita?
That's a good game.
Because I never did actually buy that game. I played the demo But I never bought it, and it looked good. I just never got around to it. I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about going back and replaying the whole Resistance trilogy. And it's my joking thing is that partially I'm doing it because Sony just seems content with never doing anything with this IP. And another interesting thing about the interview with John Garvin, it was actually a talk about the way that old IP ends up working and how it's a challenge to bring it forward. But yeah, I mean, I love Resistance 1, 2, and 3, and I love Killzone 2 and 3. I've been playing Mercenary, and I was like, there's so many games I could go back and just play again and just have fun with IP that, not even from a point of being upset about it, it's just IP that realistically is very unlikely to ever see the light of day again. And at least in a game standpoint, I think what Sony's doing right now is using IP to create non-gaming media, which may be smart because maybe you can't satisfy someone's Twisted Metal pangs in a new game, but maybe you can give them something Twisted Metal related and play with the lore of Twisted Metal by giving a TV show that just has fun and ends up being a fun, crazy cars blowing up each other. Basically a Kong versus Godzilla, but for cars. And of course, that's fun. But yeah, that's kind of where I was going. It's a little bit of a joke, but it's like F you Sony. I'm going to play all the things that you don't really care about. And Days Gone, at least right now, seems to be in that case. But yeah, it's a weird thing to be able to say that I have a PS5 and I've used it for HBO Max for 3 weeks, but that's just where I'm at. And I don't know. This is a genuine question for you, Saul, because I don't really know how you stand on this. When you're growing up and like your parents seem to only be, which thankfully my dad actually wasn't, but you see older people and they kind of seem set in their ways. Like, I'm only going to like the things I liked when I was 20 forever.
Well, they don't change.
Yeah, and it's like I don't ever give anything new a try and like anything new. For a long time, I've always liked staying on top of gaming because it's like I want to constantly play the new things and give myself that chance to like something new. And so far, that's generally worked out for me. Days Gone, fantastic. Horizon, fantastic. All this new IP, including things that are smaller like Plague Tale Innocence and stuff like that, and Greedfall. But at the same time right now, as much as I normally am like, I want to always play newer things and try and keep up with it, right now I seem pretty content to just literally kind of go back to the glory days.
Yeah.
And the thing about the glory days is that they're never as actually great as you thought, but nostalgia is, as they say, nostalgia is the good version of PTSD. I saw that the other day. I was like, okay, I guess so. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird because like I want to play new stuff, so I know that I'm not just putting myself in a corner. I do it with music too. I want to listen to new music, so I'm not that guy who only listens to the stuff he listened to when he was 18 for the rest of my life.
So for me, it's kind of like that in a way, but I think it's more so of I was grateful enough to have a very broad upbringing with video games, and I mean that by the first 2 games I ever played were Super Mario All-Stars and A Link to the Past. So a platformer and an RPG.
Yeah.
And then quickly after that, it was like trying to comprehend Chrono Trigger at that age. And
failing. Because I do it too.
And stuff like Star Fox. And then eventually Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie. There's all these kind of genre changes that go from first-person shooter to a puzzle game to an RPG, to a platformer. So I've always kept with that throughout all of my gaming life. I've always appreciated almost all the genres of games. And for me, what I end up doing almost subconsciously is taking breaks from those kind of games. So I haven't played a multiplayer gun-based shooter in like months.
Yeah.
And that was one of my favorite genres. And I've been kind of thinking of like, what kind of multiplayer-based shooter like kind of do I want to play? Like, do I want to re-download Modern Warfare? I want something with some depth, a good population to play on, where it doesn't take forever to find a server and just have fun with it. And I don't really count Breakpoint as that because I've yet to play with somebody and I've yet to play online with people or the PvP portion of it. I've just played.
Is there PvP in that game?
Yeah, there is. It's really weird to have.
I've
never played it, but
I didn't know if Wildlands had that. I really expected it to just be a co-op more than anything, I
still think Division had the coolest version of PvP in a game like this, but the coolest in terms of like the story, the Dark Zone.
Sure.
But yeah, like I always end up going back, and what's interesting is I go back to a genre and I end up crashing myself out of that genre months later by playing only that. And and I say that and I phrase it in almost a negative light, but in reality, I enjoy doing it that way because when I go back to it, I am inevitably more appreciative of these games because I haven't played them in so long.
Yeah.
And that for me is right now, like I said, going to like first person shooters and stuff like that. And eventually I'll get tired of playing, third person RPG games. So I'll stop, playing Monster Hunter or the Soul series for now, and I'll go into something else. But it's weird kind of flippy floppy design that has evolved with me.
Well, I did that with puzzle games recently because, when I was at the end of my platinuming run, I really just didn't know what I wanted to play. And it turns out that platinuming puzzle games is fun. Yeah. So I did that and I was having a blast because I was like, man, it's been so long since I've really played puzzle games that are not games with little puzzle sections, but like all out, the whole point of the game is solving puzzles. And I had a blast of that, but I played so many in such a short period that I kind of don't want to play any puzzle games for a while.
Yeah.
And I even kind of point and click adventures are just obtuse, not even in a bad way. Very strange examples of puzzle games.
Those are hard for me to get out of.
No, what do you mean?
Like, those are hard for me to, like, once I start playing them, it's hard for me to get out of that kind of genre.
Oh, yeah.
It's like The Witness kind of took me over for a while. So much that, like, I was playing it on my wife's PS4 with her, and we were just sitting there playing it, and there was a time in which 3 or 4 days a week, it'd be like 3 or 4 hours of us just sitting there trying to figure it out. And I didn't want to play anything else because that's how I get captured by puzzles.
They grip you.
I gotta finish this puzzle.
You never played it, I don't think, but I know that you know about it. The Talos Principle?
I actually played that on PS Now recently.
Oh, dude,
it's been a couple months back.
That game was entirely that. I could not stop playing that game, and every day while I was at work, I was like, I can't wait to get back home and just play the Talos Principle.
I don't know what it was about Talos Principle, but I actually experienced some pretty bad input lag on it, and screen artifacting, and I don't know why. Like I literally booted that up.
Now I played that game on PC because I got it for stupid cheap. And I regretted not playing it on PS4.
I wonder how much that is on PC.
But maybe that's what it is. I can't speak to the PS4 version of the game, but the game ran really well for me, and I was playing at 60 frames per second the whole time.
Is that game on PS4?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if that was on PS4 or PS3.
Oh, did you stream it?
Yeah, on PS4.
Oh, yeah, you can download it.
Okay,
if you're going to play it on PS4, you should download it. I could see input lag being a problem because that game's got some pretty
the game's still $40.
Ooh. See, I got it for like $7.99 years ago. Great game though. I think it was free on PS Plus at one point, but if it's on PS Now, just download it and see what it does. I wouldn't stream it. That game actually has some pretty quick fire moments where you really need to be on top of it.
Yeah, and I don't think
it's like Portal 2. Portal 2's got some pretty like, oh yeah, you really need to be on top of this. Speaking of which, did Portal 2 run at 60 frames per second on console? It seems very unlikely, but
I don't remember where I played Portal 2 at. I think I played it on PC.
I played it on PS3. I know that, but I'm a little curious because that game felt really good to me, but I don't know if it ran at 60 frames per second or just a really solid 30.
The Talos Principle's on Switch.
What?
Yeah, I did not know that.
What does that look like?
It's actually $12 on PS4 right now. I canceled my PS Now membership.
Well, there you go, dude. The game is so good, and it's got a really cool story, surprisingly. Yeah. You wouldn't think so, but it really... It's one of those... it's not super on the nose, but you can figure a lot of it out by just paying attention to the game.
It's also $7.49 on sale on the Switch.
What? I have to imagine. What does that game run like on Switch, though?
I have no clue.
I wonder what it runs like on PlayStation 4.
It looks really good.
Yeah, actually, that looks better than I would have imagined. That game is really cool. I kind of want to replay it.
What is Wheatley doing here?
Yeah, right? Yeah. Like I said, it gives you a lot of Portal 2 vibes. And the puzzles are really good, and they make you think very oddly. Also, you know how Portal 2 would have like the where you'd like jump out and throw. You have some of that on here. You don't use a portal, but there's things that will throw you across the map, and you have to be super precise with where you're landing or where they're going to land. Very good game. I love it. If you've never played the Talos Principle and you have any inkling towards puzzle games, it's a highly recommended game for me.
Well, let's hop in the community take because Daddy's hungry.
Let's hop into it. So we kind of have two, but we're going to start with the initial one, and that one was Saul actually hopped in and handled it for me because I was reeling back from vacation. I was very tired.
Were you even back in town?
I was, but barely. And that's why I was like, I'm just going to call. I'm going to see if Saul doesn't mind doing it.
Yeah, like I didn't have a problem doing it. I'm like, I was like, I'm glad we figured out when we were going to record last night because I was like, we might not be back till like 9 p.m. on Sunday. That's going to be a problem.
No, I was good, but vacation traveling does weigh on you. Anyway, Saul says, with all the rumors, news about The Last of Us remake as well as Days Gone sequel not happening, as far as we know at least, how do you feel about this? Are you excited about a remake of The Last of Us? Do you want to see a sequel for Days Gone? Let us know. And
got a lot of responses.
We did. Liam over here said, I would rather hand wash my dirty socks than play The Last of Us. And I would definitely love another Days Gone. I miss the zombie hordes. I also miss the zombie hordes. And I think it's the one thing that really made it stand out as a zombie game. Even though World War Z came out very close to it. And it was built. But then again, different game. Multiplayer shooter.
Like team shooter.
Yeah.
Speaking of going back and talking about we get really tired of genres, and then when we go back to them, we appreciate them that much more. For the longest time, I think this is like 2010 to 2012's blaming, I was sick of zombie media. I was sick of like all this stuff evolved. But now I'm ready. There's a new movie coming out with Dave Bautista in it, and it's the day.
Oh yeah, the one that Zack Snyder's doing.
Yeah, and dude, it looks phenomenal. And I watched that trailer. I'm like, you know what? It's been a while since we had a good zombie movie like this.
It's honestly been a while since we've had like a realistic zombie movie. We got in that weird period where they were making zombie movies but doing them differently, like that
World War Z.
Well, World War Z was there, but even that's been a little while. There was that Warm Bodies movie or whatever. It was like a zombie.
Was before World War Z, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I'm almost certain it is. That's a good movie.
I've heard, but that was that weird. That was 2013, and then World War Z
was like 2016, I think.
I thought it was like 2014, but 2013, same year.
Oh, okay. Two zombie movies coming out.
But yeah, even then, for a while, right, you have that thing where it's like people are getting tired of zombies. How do you make it different? Well, you make a love story about a zombie where he has to turn into a human because of love.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
It was a charming movie.
It was.
It wasn't like an Oscar award-winning movie, but you know.
From what I've heard. I haven't seen it, but I actually have a little bit of interest in watching it. But yeah, it had been a while since we've really had a lot. I mean, like, what's the most recent zombie movie I can think of? Zombieland 2?
Ugh.
I didn't watch it, so I really don't know.
I can't even think of one.
Yeah. So zombie media needed a break, but it's coming back around. I'll tell you, I was sick of it because the 360 generation was so heavy with zombies. And
was it?
Definitely towards the latter half. But you had Left 4 Dead, Left 4 Dead 2. Those were massive games. And I should say zombie games that hit the mainstream spotlight.
Yeah.
But then you had PS3 games like the little Zombies Must Die and stuff. You had like a lot of arcade style games that were zombie driven. That was where Plants vs. Zombies started. You had
Dead by Daylight?
No, that didn't start in PS3, I don't think. It might have, but I think it was early.
That's not zombies either, really.
Dead Island.
Dead Island
started, and then Dead Island Riptide came out. You had other stuff. I mean,
it
was really heavy,
but
then it kind of backed off.
But to be fair, I think that the fatigue for me did not come from just games. It came from zombie media.
Yeah,
it was like
comics. Even
it was like Walking Dead was getting big. Zombie movies were coming out left and right. Zombie books were coming out. Zombie games, like it all just meshed together, and it just was like, I'm so sick of this. Blake,
Kiki, real quick, Kiki, if you're listening, I picked up that rainbow sherbet like we talked about. Dude, it's delicious. I'm finally drinking it.
Let me see that can real quick. I want to see if it's the same nutritional facts as the bat powder is. But Blake, one of our patrons on Discord, he says he 100% agrees with Liam, and he goes on to say that he thinks it's stupid of remaking such a recent game, and it makes absolutely no sense. There are many old PlayStation games that deserve a remake. That's my biggest point of all of this, is that why I'm not a fan, is that in order to remake a game, it has to either be a very long time and that game's not accessible on many platforms, or there's a core problem wrong that they're going to fix, or core problems.
So let me find where it's at, but we do have one specifically aimed at that view of it.
Can I have the rest of this?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm thirsty.
I'm going to go run and find it real quick because just while we're on the topic of it, I want to bring this up. And it's in relation to, and we brought it up last week, so it's not like we're not aware of the fact that this does go on. But it was in regards to the remake for Demon Souls, and the argument behind Demon Souls being another PS3 era game, whereas The Last of Us was also a PS3 era game. But I think there's two very different things here.
We talked about that. We did. I think I did, at least. So, I specifically said that The Last of Us has already been remastered.
Yeah. Well, here goes. So it's Josh Farmier. He says, I'm going to be the odd one out, I assume. I don't care about either game, so it doesn't matter to me. No one had outrage over the Demon Souls remake, and yeah, that's 13 years old, but still not that old. And on paper, I agree that it doesn't sound that old, but 2009 and what that was for that generation, and also how low budget Demon Souls was. Demon Souls was a game that wasn't really supposed to come out. Sony kind of last minute came in and saved it. Had a lot of issues. They didn't even get to finish the game. That's actually why there's that broken lodestone or whatever it's called. So when you look at it from that standpoint, Demon Souls had a lot of issues. It was never that big of a game when it first came out, and so it had a very limited audience by nature of that. And I think that it came out at a point in time where, yeah, you could look at it and say that was the same year that Uncharted 2 came out. And Uncharted 2 was a really big push for PS3 games and what that generation had graphically and mechanically speaking. But a lot of Demon Souls was dated and low budget. And I think that there was a lot more of a reason to go and look at that game, which was bland as all get out visually. I love that game, but super bland, ran very poorly on PS3. It had frame drops like crazy.
Yeah.
And it had very little textures. It was, again, it was a game that had to be saved versus a game that was hyper polished, a AAA game through and through, huge budget, sold crazy well, had a huge audience, and then saw a remaster on PS4. And then not only a remaster on PS4, but a PS4 Pro
or a PS4 Pro patch.
And then an update on PS4 again to give it better load times.
For the PS5.
Even the PS4. If you play the game on base PS4, the load times dropped dramatically, which we assumed was they changed the way they handle compression.
Well, I thought Naughty Dog said that was all mainly for the PS5's load times.
Oh, the PS5 is just going to benefit even better, but even a base model PS4 with an HDD, the load times dropped by like 30 seconds.
So
this
is a big point here I like to make with this. The Last of Us could have launched on PS4 and been fine with how high quality of a game that was.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's the state it launched on a PS3. That game was, like I said last episode, pushed the hardware to the PS3 to the limit. And Demon Souls did nothing of that. On top of having a slew of glitches and performance issues. And this, I feel like I need to remind people of this. This is coming from someone who will still say that The Last of Us is in my top 10 PlayStation games of all time. And I'm just like I said in the last episode, I'm not saying I'm not going to play this remake if this is all true. I'm just saying, like, I'm just more frustrated at why, instead of something else like something, we haven't seen in forever, Siphon Filter, a new Killzone, a new Resistance, stuff like this. Like this, I feel like that this is just a waste because of how good the original Last of Us was already. I don't feel like there's a need for this at all. But
and you get into this weird thing, right, where I think sometimes games are it's the best way to say it. Games don't necessarily, there are games that come out that don't sell really well initially, that end up becoming culturally significant to gaming, and there's more of a reason to bring them forward because they were niche games when they came out. And now let me say that there are two strong examples, in my opinion. The strongest example is the one that we've already got a remake for, Demon Souls. That game did not sell super well. It sold well enough, I suppose, but it definitely didn't do the numbers Sony expected, and that's also why Sony passed on the sequel, because they even at the time didn't realize how important that game was going to be. And then we see that same formula get used but refined in Dark Souls, and then Dark Souls goes on to basically become a staple, almost a genre of its own, like you do with you look at all these games that are Metroidvanias, and there's like, oh yeah, you look at Castlevania and Metroid, and so many games have used that layout that they're their own genre now. That's basically true of Demon Souls. So that game had a significant impact on gaming culture that is continuing to be seen. But that game, for some reason, didn't really benefit from that. It had a cult following, and now that game came out on PS5 and has sold more than it ever did on PS3.
Yeah.
Just because of that.
Absolutely.
Now, a good example of a second that I think is lesser, but it still does come into.
I think I know what this is going to.
Nier.
Yeah.
The first Nier was a critical failure. I mean, it did not review very high. It ran kind of poorly. It didn't sell very well. It was the death of that studio. And what are we seeing now? For all intents and purposes, they're calling it a new version. It's kind of in between a remaster and a remake. But we're bringing that to a new audience because that game didn't sell well, but it was culturally significant in a way that led to the ability for Nier Automata to exist. And Nier Automata blew up.
And that game comes out this week, and I'm so excited.
I'm so excited too,
so
man.
excited.
So, but those are why I think that there's a difference between it. The Last of Us has sold multiple millions of copies across multiple platforms. And there's a really interesting answer to this that someone put on there. I guess while we're talking about it, I'm going to go over to it real quick. It's Shafe Dog. One of our patrons over on the Discord. He says, does Sony think The Last of Us has the appeal and longevity of Grand Theft Auto 5? It's a great game, don't get me wrong, but I don't need to see it on its third generation of consoles. I'd play Days Gone 2, especially after they worked so hard to fix so many launch issues, and maybe they have a better grasp on what they want to accomplish now. Now, the first part of that is kind of what we're talking about. Ultimately, and this goes into one that I want to do from Chris, the reality of it is, like we said, a lot of people would play this. It's kind of like Grand Theft Auto 5. I think some people are actually a little annoyed that that's going on again.
Yeah.
But more so not because of the game itself. I think it actually speaks a lot to the argument we're making. It's that why are you spending resources at Rockstar to bring this game to yet another generation of consoles when they're already backwards compatible and they can play the games in perpetuity with servers and everything up? But why are you wasting resources when a lot of people want to see Rockstar make more games? So people are like, why don't we get a new Grand Theft Auto instead of just milking more Grand Theft Auto 5? And I get it. You know, that's kind of what we're talking about here. Why is Sony spending resources on something that they could be doing something else with? Now, of course, like we said last episode, The Last of Us Remake and Days Gone 2 have zero connection. They don't matter with each other. The Last of Us Remake can happen, and Days Gone 2 can happen. They're not either or. It's not one studio who's doing that. But it's still a show of, if Naughty Dog has a second team working on something, why waste that on a remake of a game that's already sold really well and continues to be playable on PS4? That's my argument.
Meanwhile, all Rockstar pretty much does nowadays is Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto.
Exactly.
At least they're working on one of their core games.
Yeah.
And it may not be the single player DLC everybody wanted. It may not be Grand Theft Auto 6. It probably is. But it's that they're kind of wasting more resources doing it this way.
And I know it's not a waste because they're going to continue to make this money, but it's
going to make a lot of money.
It's what it is that it feels like you're spending resources, not wasting. You're spending resources on retreading because you know it's a safe bet, which is kind of the crutch of the argument against Sony there, is that they're moving in a way that no one can blame them for. They're moving in a way of wanting to make more money and take less risk because they need the money that comes from the sales of the one game to fund the next game. That's understandable. And to that degree, Chris over here on Facebook says, simply, The Last of Us is a good business move. Whether you like it or not, having a box with the full The Last of Us story so far on shelves for the TV show is the right move. Also, are we really going to pretend that The Last of Us with Part 2's graphics isn't incredibly appealing? Stop right there. He has more. Of course. And that's why we said last week, we would absolutely play it.
I'm not saying I'm not going to play this game, but it's just a very weird and hard to agree with decision to make that this is a thing. And
he says, Days Gone 2 would be wonderful. Chris is a huge fan of Days Gone, so just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
As someone who says Days Gone is far and away the best PS4 game with mass appeal, otherwise it's Persona, then Days Gone, I'm not surprised it's not getting a sequel. And I'm going to say, too, I guess I was surprised that it's not getting a sequel because it was a game that sold better and continued to do better the longer it was out. To me, it kind of reminds me of what is that game? But there are games that have existed where after they've been out for a long time, they end up getting a lot of goodwill and people playing them through, and then a sequel ends up coming because of that. And they saw such a big uptick whenever the game joined the PS5, PS Plus collection. And then they've also likely, this one's not proven yet, but they've likely seen a large uptick in players as Days Gone became a PS4, PS Plus game this last month.
Yeah.
Or this month, actually. It's ongoing right now. So I think it's one of those things where it did surprise me, and I think the fact that the game sold well, was profitable. The argument for a lot of people is it does feel weird that a risk-adverse company would not take the lesser risk, which is expanding something that had a decent foundation into something that could be a big franchise. I think where a lot of disappointment comes, and I should clarify mine real quick, is not that I think Sony's doing the wrong thing here. I don't. I actually think that realistically, Sony is probably making the absolute best decision from a business standpoint that they could. And they need to make money. And they don't have the throwaway money that Microsoft has. That's just the reality. So they have to be way more particular with what they spend money on because games are getting more expensive to make. But
I think the crux of the problem here for people to remember is that we're not necessarily dogging just the remake alone. We're dogging the fact that Bend is cannibalized for this,
and we don't really know all that.
Which is why we said this is rumors. Yeah,
but it does feel weird. And like I said last week, it feels so weird to me to say that a company who made Days Gone that you viewed as not good enough is getting to work on a new IP, but that new IP is probably contingent on a lot of things. It needs to be greenlit. It's probably somewhat contingent on them helping with other things, but we don't know that. But what I should say is, and then I'll just go on and we'll grab a couple more and then go through the news, but I am not bemoaning the business decisions that need to be made for Sony to stick around, because that's realistically what it is. And if I want to continue being a PlayStation player, to some degree, I've got to let them make some decisions that I personally don't agree with. But I'm bemoaning to a degree the potential, and again, potential, because we don't really know, that Sony might be... Actually, I can say this with absolute fact. Sony is not the company right now that they were when I fell in heavy love with them in the PS3 era. You know, a lot of people view PS2. PS2 is a great console, and I played a lot of it, and I loved it. And I played a lot of PS1, but I didn't have a lot of money, so I skipped out on a lot of games. PS3 was where I really got solidified in there, and they made a lot of really great games that did not sell big. Games were cheaper to make then. They were also in a position where they needed to make games that made people buy their console, even if they didn't necessarily make money themselves, like the game itself. As long as they were getting consoles out there and getting that third-party sales money, it was worth it because they were so behind 360 at the time.
And at one point, they were losing money on not only console sales, but game sales as well. They were making very low... The profits were pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a game like Uncharted that took a lot of money to make, releasing on a PS3 that didn't have a big install base, that game probably ended up being profitable in the long run, but initially that game was probably a loss leader because it was like, but we have to make this game to get people to buy our system.
And then it exploded, which meant every sale was a loss technically.
Yeah, but what I should say is across the board, I liked Sony when they were making decisions and going, we have to have games that are compelling. And I just wish... compelling regardless of if they're going to be huge in the market. And I am going to somewhat miss that if we don't see them push that, like we kind of are right now, into a different sphere. I would like to see it be more internal because I think they have a little bit more control over it. And it's weird, but basically, as much as Destruction All-Stars is an interesting game, I think it's overpriced, and it's a game that's dead pretty quickly. I mean, if we're being honest, as much as I'm glad they let somebody make the game, who talks about that game now? I'm sure people play it, and that's cool, but it's just, I think Concrete Genie's still being talked about more, and it was recently free, so that helps, but so was Destruction All-Stars, and I think more people are talking about Concrete Genie than Destruction All-Stars because it's a more interesting game.
Yeah.
And it was a small game. So, but enough about all that. I just wanted to kind of specify what it is. I'm not... I'm going to keep playing PlayStation for now, at least. We'll see if they make decisions that make it worse for me, but...
this podcast will be over. I'm going to get with what I think is the most, it's the most supportive and yet important one off of Discord in terms of this decision, and that comes from a patron named Rude Days 93. He says, there's a plethora of other games on PS3, many of which are about to be lost forever, that need remakes over The Last of Us. And another thing to think about this last gen, Naughty Dog released only 2 games, and if their resources are now going, and this is it... And if their resources are now going to this, is it possible that we only get one other game from them this gen?
I guess it's possible.
It is possible. We've talked about this before, and it's not something I necessarily love, but these big AAA games from Sony first-party studios typically take 2 years to 3 years on average. Some of them have a little bit less than 2 year window, but if you want a big blowout AAA first-party studio game from Sony, it's typically in production for a while. And
I guess just to clarify real quick, I don't want to interrupt you, but I think it's important right there, is the big sequels to Sony games typically take a roughly 3 year window right about now. And that looks like it might be getting longer. But if you look at a game like Horizon Zero Dawn, came out in 2017, and we're still not in the sequel. Now, the sequel is a PS5 game, which means it needs more development time. And it's also a PS4 game. So now we're kind of seeing what if Horizon doesn't actually release this year, which even if it does, we're looking at a 4 year window between releases.
Yeah,
which is long. That's longer than it used to be. Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, much smaller scale games. In all fairness, each released 2 years apart from each other.
I was gonna say, wasn't it like 1 year and like 11 months?
I mean, yeah, something like that.
Dang near 2 years.
Yeah, and then a bigger game scale wise, at least. Like Infamous 1 to Infamous 2, also a 2 year window with a huge jump up. So development's taking a lot longer, but new IP takes even longer. So clarified, I said 5 years. Apparently Days Gone was right around 6 years of development, but Horizon Zero Dawn was around 5 years of development.
So it's just a long gap. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine as well, is that like you play a game, the game's over. It's kind of one of the critiques I had about Final Fantasy 7 Remake was like how long between part 1 and 2. Because so far we're going on over a year right now.
Well, right around it. I mean, yeah, because we just had the anniversary.
Yep. Yeah. So we're now officially over 1 year, and we have not gotten a trailer for part 2. Granted, we have side content coming, which I would rather have part 2 than side content.
Me too.
The side content could come at the very end as like filler to fill in stuff between parts. They did it with Final Fantasy 15. I don't know why they don't do it now.
Oh yeah, like release the whole game and let that be. Oh yeah, this is what was going on in between.
Yeah. So I don't know why they didn't do that with this. It's kind of odd of a choice. Rob Henry, this is, I guess, the last one we'll get off Discord. He says, I love Days Gone. With that being said, I'm not upset at the fact that there might not be a sequel. Ben can work on other IP, and he says Siphon Filter would be great. But a remake of an 8-year-old game, come on. They're trying to hype up the TV series and then copy the success of Final Fantasy VII. Let it go. I don't like, because Chris did this too, and Rob did this, and I wish they were wrong, but I have a feeling they're not in terms of the whole reason for this is for the TV series. Because A, if the TV series does not do good, then this was all for nothing. And B, why are we getting to a day and an age in which we're remaking media to hype up a subsection of the other media? Back when like Jurassic Park 2 came out, they weren't remaking Jurassic Park 1. Or they would just simply, hey, Jurassic Park 1, get this cool popcorn cup at Blockbuster now.
Yeah, they would normally do that. Like they would re-release it. Like if it's been long enough, they'd be like, oh, here's Jurassic Park 2 and Jurassic Park 1 gets a director's cut.
They could totally do that. They could do a cool collector's edition bundle of Last of Us 1 and 2, $80. So some kind of cool price. Steelbook, and then some other cool things, and then like a deluxe version of this bundle. And then they can market it directly next to the show.
Without having to actually spend resources.
That's why I'm kind of hoping that this is kind of a wrong assessment, even though I have a feeling in the back of my head it's not. Because it makes sense. It just...
Interesting thing that could somewhat look at this, right? And it does depend on the quality of the final thing. But if y'all remember, they actually held back the release of Ratchet and Clank on PS4 in order to coincide with the movie.
Yeah.
And the movie was a little pushed, so they held the game because they wanted the game and the movie to be synergistic. And if y'all remember, the game did really well. The movie did really bad,
and that's
and so it goes to show that I don't know. I think it's probably the right idea to try and approach these things from a synergistic standpoint and get carryover from people who love the movie but maybe never played the game, so they decide to buy a PS4 and then play the game, or they decide in this case with The Last of Us to buy a PS5 and then the game, or even a PS4, I guess.
Can't buy a PS5 right now.
Yeah, right. Well, then again, we don't know how far out the show is. Maybe by then it will be.
I would guess... I'm going to guess something. I keep saying guessed. I would guess something real quick. It is Sunday, March 18th. 2021. We are just now getting casting choices. We got Tommy over the weekend. I would guess that this show is out come next summer. Because if they're just now releasing casting choices, they have not started principal photography or production.
Yeah, its starting filming date was released, though. It's going to, let's see.
I didn't know this.
Cameras are set to start rolling on July 5th of this year and are scheduled to wrap almost a year later on June 8th, 2022.
Okay, so I lied. I'm not going to predict summer of 2022. I'm going to predict winter or spring of 2023.
Winter would be great.
Winter of 2022 or spring of 2023.
Pull into probably the best part of that whole game, which is the winter segment.
They're going to film in a big studio. They're just going to make fake snow.
Oh, no, I'm saying that releasing in winter would be cool because it's kind of like how you say when you want to play The Last of Us in the winter.
No, it's in the fall.
Oh, sorry.
For those that don't know, I am very weird. I like to think of some games as seasonal plays, and I'll play them in that season, and Last of Us 1 is fall, and it's favorite game to play in the fall.
So I want to get a couple more real quick off of
Twitter.
No, go
Facebook.
I'm going to go Facebook. Yeah. So real quick on Twitter, just someone here, Exploding Platypus says, I want a Jak and Daxter sequel instead of either. And we'll get into that in a little bit.
A remake of Jak and Daxter or a sequel would be fantastic. I would rather wreck a remake, though.
Okay, so Mark Schutz, which is interesting. He's a big Xbox gamer, and he's been listening to us for a long time. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate you. And he recently became a patron.
Thank you, bud.
He says, even though I never got into The Last of Us, remaking it seems to be excessively milking the game at this point. And I think there's a fine line between what the core people who see what you're doing feels like milking, and then the more general audience who maybe didn't play The Last of Us and are like, oh, I can play a new version of The Last of Us. There's a disconnect between us and the people who this is probably really made for. But I get that people who are pretty tapped into the gaming, it feels like milking it. And that's probably true of Grand Theft Auto 5. There's probably people who have been hearing about it, and now that it's coming on PS5, they've never played it, and they go, okay, well, I'm getting a PS5. I guess I can play Grand Theft Auto 5 in the best possible way.
We've talked about this before, though, on how marketing typically does that for that exact reason, and it almost never benefits them. It is very weird.
Now, what do you mean by benefits? In terms of sales or what?
Well, it's very weird, or it's very uncommon for a company to, I don't want to say pander because I hate that word, but it's very uncommon for a company to pander to it's another term I hate using, but a lower common denominator.
Mm-hmm.
And with only that in mind, and it work out well for them. That's why you see some people will, like, some companies will be like, this is the perfect thing for you guys, but the casual people don't care. They're going to do it no matter what because they're casual. They don't care. And that's the thing is with how long The Last of Us has been out, I would be shocked if the people who played it for the first time on PS4 remake is a lower number than the people who play it on the first time on the PS5 remake. I would bet you money that when it came out on PS4, you're gonna have more people playing it then than you will when the PS5 one comes out.
Yeah.
I'm not saying sales or whatever. I'm saying for people who have played it for the first time.
Yeah. Which is arguably the reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
Now, but it's also because you have a built-in audience of people like you and I who realistically would buy it and play it. Now, the weird thing about this, I don't think I'd actually play a Last of Us remake day one unless there was just nothing else out.
Would you pay $70 for it?
I don't think so.
See,
if I'm being honest, because I already have a version that I know is good, that I know they haven't changed anything on. And now the argument becomes, do they change something outside of just graphics and maybe small gameplay mechanics?
No. This is where you're gonna get to my, I'm gonna say pet peeves for like third time in the show. My pet peeves of remakes of stuff. If you are remaking it,
how faithful can you stay?
How faithful can you stay? And when you start adding in new stuff, I said this last episode, if they start dilly-dallying around with stuff that they retconned into to fix the retcon and make it canon, stop. That is my biggest, I can't tell you how much Star Wars did this, where they retconned something in the third movie of Rise of Skywalker, they retconned something in The Last Jedi, and then they mentioned it in the book of The Rise of Skywalker, that it was now like this, and it was like you're doing nothing but confirming a retcon that doesn't need to be confirmed. You retcon it, let it flow.
So here's the weird thing about that is for people who are playing The Last of Us 1 for the first time and then going The Last of Us 2, if that's ideally what the goal is here, like, Chris says, having the entire story game-wise on one system. So if people are playing it for the first time, and I specifically mentioned that target audience, if they play The Last of Us remake and then they play The Last of Us 2, that just feels way more connected and whole to them. And they don't get the disconnect that you and I may have had being like, that's not exactly how the end of the first one goes, but we know you're trying to do something. So we'll forgive it, but it does feel a little more odd.
That's the problem too, is that it comes down to the core story making decisions of the second game of, well, we're going to kind of change how this part in the first one happened a little bit, just very minorly, but in a very big way for our story. But then now when the remake comes out, we're going to have to fix that in the first one to make it fit the story better. That should never happen in a story. You should never have to do that. And you may disagree with that, and that's fine, or you may agree with that, but I don't ever think that if you write a story out, that it's planned in such a way that you have to go back twice, technically at this point, to change something that you did. Now it's your story. Do what you want with it. I'm not saying don't.
Yeah, sure.
But I'm just saying that for me is not a preference I like. There are book series that have done that, and they've done it in really bad ways. There are video game series that have done it in really bad ways. Star Wars kind of did it with the movies. It feels so unnatural, and it takes you out of the actual story, because at that point you realize, oh yeah, a human being in my world wrote this. This is not what this game is telling me as a story in this world.
Yeah, sure.
And it takes you out badly.
Okay, I'm gonna grab two more on Facebook because we do got to get going.
Yeah,
someone we don't hear from a lot, so I wanted to grab his. Jeff Schrock says, I think remaking an 8-year-old game is stupid. That being said, I don't think anyone would turn down playing it again with better graphics and gameplay enhancements. My main issue with them right now is how they are treating their legacy titles. That's why I wanted to read this one. I don't care how old a game looks. If it's fun and brings me good memories, then I'm going to want to replay it for many years to come. I actually just bought a handheld PS2 since all my old hardware is starting to crap out on me, and I'm excited to get it.
What is a handheld PS2?
So there's actually a really cool video on it, and he ended up posting the exact video because I'd seen it before. It's pretty interesting. It's a big 3D printed case with some text shoved in it to be a perfect PS2.
Hey, do me a favor on that and play Nightfire 007. That's the best 007 game there ever is.
Now, that's a big thing, and I do think that comes down to people think, and it's very different resources. It's not a normal development team, but yeah, I could see that. There is a sentiment amongst what people expect from Jim Ryan's previous remarks that he's not too keen on that. So if he, the big president of the company, is not going to want to do it, it seems unlikely that it would happen, which is a valid concern. The last one I'm going to grab over here is from someone else that we don't hear from often, or at least, we try to vary up who we get stuff from. Derek Porter says, a remake of The Last of Us is completely unnecessary. It came out on PS3, got an upgrade to PS4. It's an amazing game, but they need to move on. As far as no sequel to Days Gone, it's a shame. The game felt unfinished. So many different ways they could take it. A new protagonist, location, or place and time could work for a sequel. And I think that's true, even though the sequel, I want to say, was really setting up for Deacon. I would be curious to see, because that's always what I thought The Last of Us sequel was going to be. Different people in that same world.
That's always what I thought it would be, and I would prefer myself it would have been. It would have been so cool, because this is a somewhat unused trope that they have for zombies, where they're technically not zombies, they're technically fungus or fungi.
Yeah.
But it would be so dope to have 2 or 3 or 1 brand new character to this universe and explore this universe and hear about the actions of Ellie and Joel, but you never meet them, you never see them. And you yourself are battling your own story. That'd have been so cool. I prefer greatly if they would have done that instead of what they did with 2. But we didn't get that. Sorry.
Yeah, well, and people like this interconnected thing, and so I feel like even if they did a second, with how much Marvel's shown that people like interconnected media, I think that even if they did a game with separate characters, they would try and have our characters brush up against people from the first Last of Us, whether it be it took place before and we get to see Marlene and more of what she had going on.
Take place in the 20-year gap.
Yeah, if it takes place in the 20-year gap, but with new people, and somehow they brush up against Joel, or at the very least, I feel like they would try and be like, you hear people talking about someone, and it's very strongly alluded to the fact that it's Joel in that 20-year gap, and that stuff's fine. I don't really mind that. But
I'm going to stay very far away from spoilers in regards of 2 for this, but I'm going to just describe something that would have been so cool. What if 2 was done with the protagonist, I'm going to be very loosely here, but you did not realize what it was doing until the very end.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That would have been done so much better than what they did. And you still got the payoff.
Yeah.
You still got the raw emotions from it, but it happened at the end of the game.
They halfway do that, but that's actually what it is, because it's the halfway point. I'm really interested for you to play the game just so we can have a real long talk about it.
No, I'm not talking about the halfway point in terms of that. I'm talking about what happens in the game.
Yeah, I know.
An early versus, like, you have no clue. This is who you are.
Yes,
this is why.
I know. But that's one thing. I'm curious to just hear you play about it. So not even necessarily on the show. I just want to talk to you about it, because we've had so many talks about the ideals behind it, because you know a lot of what happens, but you don't necessarily know the pacing of it, the gameplay pacing of it, and all those things. I'm curious to hear you talk about it.
I have a hot take for that real quick. If it's a first-party Sony AAA game, pacing is probably not great.
Well, actually, that's one of the big things I'll say about Days Gone. As much as I loved it,
slow start.
Slow start.
Real slow.
I think it earns that by the end, but if you can't get through that, then you just feel like this game is paced terribly, which arguably at the beginning it is.
And be vague, but when did you say that game starts to really ramp up?
Depending on the player, because it's an open world game.
Yeah.
I would argue for most people within 7 to 10 hours.
Okay. So
which is a long way into a game.
So is that,
to be fair?
Yeah. That is either at or after the clinic. Or I say clinic, but the new settlement.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Either way.
That's when I stopped playing. I'm going to have to restart it because I didn't transfer all my saves over. So I'm going to have to restart and get to that, which is a speed run I'm going to do.
Yeah, there you go. Real quick, our second one, and we're going to be a lot quicker on this one because we still want to hit news. But this is just something that was interesting. Rude Days 93, one of our listeners and patrons, he pointed out that at the time, which was yesterday, today marks the 10th anniversary of PSN hack of 2011 that left us without PSN connectivity for just short of a month. It was 2 days short of a month.
Yep.
Were you, this is the question we put out there, were you a PlayStation gamer at the time? If so, how did it affect your day-to-day habits? Did it affect your confidence in the brand at all? Do you feel Sony did a good enough job responding to the situation and making it up to its users? If you weren't a PlayStation gamer at the time, did you know about it happening, and did you think about it as you decided to dive into the PS family in the PS4 gen?
Do you want that to be our community's take?
We can. I mean, we already got some answers, but we didn't get a lot because it was shorter. I posted it shorter. We can do that as a community's take.
I kind of want to do that for next week's community take because that's actually a pretty cool question. Like
I would like to get more answers than we currently have. So I'm okay with that.
What is that, 4?
4. Yeah, and I posted it on Facebook. We got a couple on Facebook.
We'll make that our community's take, and we'll just because that's in our discussion for community's take, right?
Yes. Well, it's in community's take discussion.
So we'll just keep that in there, and then we'll go off that. The normal community's take area, then Twitter and Facebook. Yeah,
we'll do that. So, okay, cool. That's a good way because we really do need to cut time.
Well, no, it's not just about that, but I'm just saying that's a good. I want to hear
hidden benefit is all I was getting at.
Oh, okay.
It does help us cut time, but I do want more answers because I'm really curious to see people who jumped on in PS4 brand or PS4 era if they made a conscious decision to be like, I'm buying a PS4 and I'm getting involved in the PS ecosystem, even though I'm aware of the fact that anywhere from 2 years ago to and 6 years ago that they got completely, 10 years ago, I guess, whatever, they got hacked.
I have my thoughts about it too because that was something I actually considered.
When you bought a PS3?
Yeah.
Because you bought a PS3 afterwards.
Yeah, 2 years afterwards. Not only did I buy a PS3 afterwards, but it was still thought considerations that I used to this day going into PS5.
Yeah, it's something to think about. Yeah, it has a big impact on people, I think, but we'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts about that. So we're going to go ahead and head into the news.
Hold on, what was that? What did they give you for free after? Was it Uncharted?
Oh, a bunch of games.
Yeah,
and it's actually you got to get 2 games and you had to choose. There was a list of games.
Yeah, and I think Uncharted 2 was the best one among all those.
I don't think Uncharted was in there. I think Infamous was.
Was it? Infamous is okay. That's what it was.
Infamous 1 was in there. It might have been Infamous 2, but they had a selection of games.
Yeah,
and then some other stuff.
Well, that's the community's take. If you selected a game, what game did you select?
And I'm pretty sure you got 2. You get to select 2 from a list of however many. And it was like, hey,
wow, thank you, Sony. What a $120 value for a month of no service.
Well, there was that, but there was a lot more to it than that. They gave everybody free PS Plus to make up for the time they didn't have it if they had PS Plus, which wasn't a requirement.
$130 value. Let's get this value pumped up a little bit for my credit card that got stolen.
This was the craziest expense on there, just so everyone's aware. I can't remember the exact longevity of it, but they actually had where if you reached out with them and gave them your credit card information and all that. Hold on. Not that.
So well.
Not that. If you, it wasn't even them. It wasn't Sony.
Okay.
They reached out to a third-party lawyer and all sorts of things to where it was basically like credit watching, to where it's like, if for any reason you had any issues or if you're worried about it for years to come, you get this many years of absolutely free credit monitoring.
What did that just happen with?
Was it Equifax?
Yeah, it was the Equifax hack. They give you like a free service, which is a service you should not pay for, by the way.
Yeah.
Like most good credit card companies do that for you.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Sony did it for that way. Even people with credit cards and debit cards and all that, you could go into it and it would monitor those things and see. It was cool. I mean,
unusual
cool
activities.
cool in the sense of it's what you have to do in this situation.
Yeah.
And if they didn't, I think there's a strong argument that they did not do the right thing. But we'll see what everyone else's opinions are on that. But before we get in the news, remember that this show is brought to you by us and you. That's always important. So we got a couple of new patrons this week. Actually, while I was on vacation, I got to see my phone buzz up.
We got a clever one. We think they're clever.
Yeah, I'm curious. What if it's completely they didn't think about that at all? That would be so funny. But we'll get into those. We'll go ahead and actually say a big thank you. We got Bailey Robertson, who's over on the Facebook, and we also got Ham and Egger. If you were trying to be clever, you didn't quite get me. Anyway. Oh man. Post that in the Discord. If you're in our Discord, look at this picture of Saul in the movie theater.
This is not me.
Anyway, the show is brought to you by you guys. All these patrons first of all, it's brought to you by anybody who listens to this show. I wouldn't do it if we didn't have a lot of people listening every week. So first of all, thank you guys. For the extra people who go in and do the extra mile of putting anywhere from $1 to some of you pay $10 a month. Thank you guys so much. I mean, really, it's awesome. But yeah, we have those two new patrons. We had some patrons leave though as well, which happens. We know that y'all aren't an endless well of money. Nobody is. So for however long you stay, even if you're a patron for a single month, we are seriously indebted to you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you all. I've said it before, but the people don't realize the hidden cost of doing a podcast. And
I didn't when we started at all.
Yeah, that was like, we got to spend $120 again on what?
Yeah, so remember, you can head over if you want to be one of those patrons and get cool little thank yous for being a patron. You can head over to patreon.com/Nartech and consider giving as little as $1 per month. But the news is pretty interesting. It was a pretty slow week, but we still pulled together the things that I think were interesting to do. So one of the big things that actually did happen this week was the Resident Evil showcase that they had again. And despite old rumors stating otherwise from old Dusk Golem, if y'all remember back, 6, maybe 8 months ago, he was saying that Resident Evil was struggling. Resident Evil 8 specifically was struggling to hit frame rate on PlayStation 5 and run at a solid resolution. And I think all of that was based on the fact that they showed an early state of the game, which did have frame rate issues.
Right.
Which is fine. It's an early state of the game. They're just doing their best to show it. We now have, from Capcom, confirmation that Resident Evil Village on PS5 will run at 4K resolution with a frame rate of 60 frames per second when playing without ray tracing. If you want to play with ray tracing, that frame rate drops down a little bit to 45 frames per second. But they still know a resolution of 4K, which is interesting. I wonder if it's recompiled 4K or native. PS4 Pro fares well at 4K 30 frames per second when on resolution mode, or 1080p 60 frames per second on performance mode, which is awesome that PS4 Pro is still getting a 60 frames per second mode. And lastly, base model PS4 comes in at 900p 45 frames per second, which is also interesting. Sacrificing 1080p to try and make the game as fluid as you can.
Yeah.
And the bigger question, with it being 45, I doubt it. Is that a solid 45, or is that variable?
What a weird.
Can you frame lock to 45 frames per second? I don't think you can.
So on PC, you can. Like, you could definitely set a frame rate cap and put it at a number. Most of the time though, it's 30, 60, 120, 144, 240. Like, you can't customize it in a lot of the games I've seen. There might have been an instance where you can, but what a weird compromise. Like, could you not do just 1080p 30?
Well, you could, but I'm assuming they want the game to feel as smooth as possible. And I'll tell you right now, as someone who's playing Killzone Mercenary at roughly 45 frames per second, it's a big difference.
It's a 50% increase.
Yeah, it's a big difference. And you don't realize how much that really can affect a game. Also, a few times when I'm playing the Vita for a longer period, because of the fact I'm overclocking it to do this, I've had the system just, I'm assuming because of thermals, completely lock up 3 times now. Oh, because it's just like,
dial back your overclock.
I did a little bit, and it still did it once since then. And
what gigahertz are you at, or does it tell you?
CPU 444.
actually kind of impressive for that little thing.
Yeah, the normal is 333, and you can do 500 if that's the holy crap one.
So I put that picture of me in Discord, and Chad said, "What movie did you see?"
Oh, that's funny. Anyway, on top of all that, PS owners were treated to a 30-minute demo of the village setting for an 8-hour window on April 17th, which was yesterday, and we'll have a similar 30-minute castle demo for the same 8-hour window on April 24th, which I think is next Saturday. If you plan to play the game outside of the PS ecosystem and want a taste, demos on other platforms drop on May 1st and are playable for 24 hours. Now, this is interesting because I'm not surprised that PlayStation got early access demos. We already had the one demo. I can't remember what it was called. You played it, I think.
Why did you do this to me?
I can't remember the name. Either way, we had that demo very similarly. Huh?
Window?
No, I don't think so. But we had the demo of Resident Evil 7 that was early access as well. But not only are they doing early access, they're doing limited time window early access. So you get to play a 30-minute demo, but you have 8 hours to play that demo, and then it's just gone? That's what I'm understanding here. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. But that's what it seems like. And that's going to be true of the Castle one as well. And then even when the demo drops for everyone on May 1st, it's only going to be playable for a 24-hour window.
Which is interesting.
What do you think that is? Do you think that's like a fear of missing out style campaign where it's like they want everyone to come in and really hype the game up because they're going to want to play it?
I don't know.
To me, you have to have a lot of confidence in your game to do this, because I think by telling people that, oh, you can only play this for 8-hour window, you're trying to make people think, oh, this is something I can't miss. And then if they play it and it just bores them a little, if it's anything less than super compelling, then I have the fear or the feeling that people would be like, this isn't really all that great, I'm just going to wait for a sale.
Well,
which Chad actually, I think, said on Discord.
Yeah, I'm waiting for a sale on that game too, because what intrigues me the most about it is the nature of the house and the village. I want to see how well they transition those areas in the game.
Sure.
But yeah, it's weird. It's like you think to yourself, well, I have nothing to lose, so I might as well play it. But then you only have 8 hours to play, which not every full-time working adult can do that.
Oh, there's people who absolutely missed it because they were at work.
Yeah. So it's like I don't know like what the point of that was. I genuinely don't.
And it's just a small one. Like, why not a 24-hour window?
Because for me, if I am here's where they're missing the target is the target audience. A demo. It's for those who don't know if they're interested in buying the game. Why would a time limit make that even more?
Because I don't really
desirable?
think that's for the audience. I think this is for the people that they're trying to get to buy it day one, who just want to taste, and they're trying to give them that little morsel and be like, here you go, chew on that for a little bit.
Day one, what are they gaining?
Well, maybe they aren't. Maybe these are people who really are thinking about it, and they're I mean, I don't really know. This is weird.
For me, that's like, I'm kind of thinking about buying this game, not exactly on day one. An 8-hour demo is not going to be, oh, I got to get this guy, got to play it. Like, no.
Well, there's people that have that mindset, though.
I know.
I've got to play it, and I've got to try it. It's a weird choice. Speaking of weird things, Aloy follows Kratos as another PS character making their way into Fortnite. Whether this has always been likely to happen or it's happening as a result of Sony's recent investment in Epic remains to be seen. Of course, we'll probably never know that. But either way, PlayStation fans who want to keep seeing their favorite exclusive characters in the game, or if you are a big Fortnite player, should be happy and should probably expect more. If I'm being honest, I'm genuinely surprised that Nathan Drake has not made an appearance already. I think he probably is the most immediate fit for that game. But I wouldn't be surprised, definitely since we're seeing Aloy and Kratos, I wouldn't be surprised if we see Jin Sakai, maybe even Deacon, if Sony decides that they want to continue to do things with Days Gone with the PC version coming out. Also, that's something to say. The PC version of Days Gone comes out next month, I think May 18th. I could be wrong on that. But that will be interesting to see as well. And how much do they view that market as valuable? Like, what if Days Gone sells 5 million units on PC? What does that mean? Do they look at that and go, these are people that might have liked this game enough to buy a PS5 if we greenlight a sequel, let's go ahead and do it? Or do they look at that and go, these are people who played this game because it was on their platform of choice and wouldn't immediately buy a second game, so it doesn't necessarily matter in terms of greenlighting a sequel for PS5 because these are sales that may only exist on PC in perpetuity.
I don't know. That's the question of the day, isn't it? Like,
yeah, I'm curious the vertical slices they're looking at there. Like, how are they looking at that dollar amount, and like how much does Horizon releasing on PC affect the way they view Horizon 2 as a PS5, PS4 game.
Well, okay, and we always said this too, is that it's not. It's a great thing that they're getting exclusives to PC for people that play them, and then it's a
new audience.
It's an even better way to say, "Oh, this sequel's coming out. I need to buy a PS5." Why plan this the way that?
Yeah, oh, dude, what a hit! What a hit for Sony to be like, "Oh, you know the Days Gone PC that we're coming out with? By the way, we're not doing a sequel."
Yeah.
And I only mean that for people who may have been interested and been like, "Oh, yeah, I'm gonna get this because there's probably a sequel coming, and I just want to play it on PC." It's a weird, regardless of whether that even existed, it's a weird PR hit that I'm sure they didn't expect right before the PC version is coming out. You know,
it's just it's crazy. I think Jason Schreier really threw a wrench in the machine with that article.
You know what the question becomes though?
Huh?
The game's about a month away. Is a month a long enough time for the gaming community for their anger to be basically settled by then, and then to just buy it and support all these things anyway?
I mean, even if if I've never played a game and I hear a sequel's not happening, that's not going to dissuade me from playing a game if it's already good.
True, but it may make you go, well, do I really want to invest all this time in the first one if the second one's not happening anyway? And I think that's a person. I think basis.
Honestly, I would have to look up, which is hard to do, but I'd have to look up to find out if the ending only makes sense if it sets up for a sequel. If the ending itself sets up for a sequel and it ends on a cliffhanger or on a dime like that, then I'm like, well,
kind of does actually.
Well,
it's weird. The story makes sense within itself.
Is there a story closure for this one game?
Kinda.
Okay,
but it clearly and strongly sets up another game.
That's why you shouldn't do this dumb shit that people do with cliffhangers and stuff like that, because like what was the famous movie that got a cliffhanger?
I'll give them this
for
though.
Something that didn't happen.
Oh,
it was a superhero movie. I felt like where the character was like next time, and then that movie just never happened because it sold so badly the first time.
I don't know, but I'll tell you this much: Let us know. It's been a little while since I've played it, but if I'm not mistaken, the thing that really boldly sets up another game is actually a post-credit. Like, the credits roll, then you're back in the game, and it's a new mission that pops up. So it's weird because you don't have to go do it. You can beat the game and roll credits. So there is
closure that doesn't.
Yes. I
have a feeling we'll get pissed off when I beat this game now.
I'm pissed because I really want to see where the sequel is taking this, because the extra mission is so interesting in what it sets up that I'm like, dude, I need to know now, which is the point of a cliffhanger. It's like the ending of the Order 1886 where you're like, oh, word? What's going to happen next?
Yeah.
And then you just don't find out. But it's weird because you have to have that. If you don't plant that seed to some degree, I don't want to say that, because like Uncharted 1 and 2 and 3 and even 4 don't immediately set up. Probably actually the one that does the most is Uncharted 4.
Oh, is it 4? I thought it was 3.
No, 4 is the one that sets up for another one the most. And it's not even anything other than just like a wrapping up, but it has the most potential to be like, oh, this could be leading towards the next
10 years
game.
later, or 8 or 18 years later, or whatever they want to do.
All the other games are just self-closed. They don't really end on cliffhangers. You get a nice bow on it, and it's done. It doesn't even reference anything else.
Honestly, that's how sequels should end. I think unless...
But Marvel, and how much they've impacted entertainment.
I'll say this, though. Marvel themselves, you should never attempt what Marvel does, because no matter whatever they touch is going to be gold. that stuff's going to.
But I think Marvel's impacted entertainment in such a way that everyone's like, but we got to have that. We got to have that last minute post credit thing, or that last minute thing that makes people go, "Oh, I got to find out what the next one is." Think about it. God of War did it.
That's fine if you know these sequels happening.
Sure, that's true.
Perfectly fine if you are 100%.
But you never know, right? Because that game, think about this.
Corey Balrog knew there was going to be a second God of War.
God of War 2018 could have come out and just flopped so hard.
But it could have in an upside down world where we don't live.
Yeah.
No, Corey Balrog knew exactly what was happening. He knew there was going to be a sequel. 100%.
Well, and I think Sony typically works under the auspices of there being a sequel. The thing about Days Gone that's weird is I can guarantee you there are people making Days Gone 2 before Days Gone 1 shipped. And I mean that very basically.
Yeah.
Either storyboarding, or if it's not storyboarding yet, looking at tech and being like, what tech do we want to use? And let's start trying to get that going and working. Because like one of the things they talked about, early days for Days Gone, when they decided that they wanted hordes before the story was even completely done, that one of the first things they got working was the horde system, and it was running very quickly in very early days because that's the tech they wanted to build the game around.
Okay, Nakey Jakey has a series that's called Games That Should Bang. and it's taking two games and putting them together to make a masterpiece.
Okay. I did not know this,
Days
but
Gone,
that sounds great.
Days Gone, Death Stranding.
Bam, bam.
Days Gone in the Guerrilla Engine.
Actually, you know what's interesting?
Ballin'.
I watched both of the interviews that David Jaffe did with both John Garvin and Jeff Ross, who are Jeff Ross was the game director and John Garvin's creative director.
Yeah.
Now they're both gone from Ben, so that doesn't really matter anymore in anything. But he was just kind of talking to him about it, and there was a question that someone gave of like, if you had to choose an engine for Days Gone 2, what would you have preferred to do? Unreal Engine 5 or something like Decima, and he actually said that
Decima Engine.
He said that as sexy as Unreal Engine 5 is, and that there's a lot of cool stuff you can do. He said Decima probably would have been the better choice because it's an engine that they own, and that when things are built for it, they're going forward. Because he's talked about Unreal Engine 4 and 5, and he goes, when you're building a game in Unreal, you're making what you're making, and you're updating that, and then Epic are making what they're making, and those don't always line up. So Epic's not always improving the engine for the thing you actually want to do.
Right.
And that's why you get games like Batman Arkham Knight, which didn't upgrade to 4 because 4 did not include any of the special tools they had built completely around 3. So they're like, it makes more sense for us to use our super heavily modified Unreal Engine 3 that we've built specific tools for than it does to go into the next version of Unreal.
Right.
But yeah, it would have been cool to see Days Gone 2 adopt the Decima engine if that was the realm they were going to go to. But at the same time, tech debt. All the systems you built for the first game for Unreal Engine are not going to work in Decima day one.
That's true.
So you suddenly gain a lot more time and development because you have to rebuild these tools in Decima. I mean, it's who knows? It's interesting, but Decima is a very pretty engine.
Why is this the next news piece?
Because it's important.
No, it's not.
In a time where censorship concerns across the industry run rampant.
I mean, that's important.
Consoles are set to get another Leisure Suit Larry adventure as Wet Dreams Dry Twice. I love this name. Oh boy. Because it's super poking fun at games already.
I know.
It comes, pun intended, to consoles on May 18th. Will its special brand of raunchy humor remain intact in the move from its PC release? Because it's already released last year on PC to PlayStation. And this is important because right now PlayStation is being, at
Terrible.
least from us, know, from internet gaming media or internet gaming culture, all the people who are media or not are looking at their what they do in terms of censorship, and a game like this seems easy target to be heavily censored and changed. I'm really curious to see the people who are inevitably going to do the comparison to the PC version to the PS4 version and look at what's changed and what's been flat out cut or just changed. I mean, coming from the company that for whatever reason decided to put a big glare over a butt, but then also let you see a full-on rough sex scene in another game. I mean,
because it's first party.
But regardless, that's interesting. And also, I'm going to be honest, Leisure Suit Larry games are just funny. If you watch the trailer for this, it's hilarious. I kind of half want to play it.
I have never liked these games. They're all been just lame.
Well, way back in the day, I actually agree, but these games have modernized pretty well with the last one, which if you don't remember, it's Wet Dreams Don't Dry or whatever. It was, I don't remember the actual name, and of course we see that played on here because this is like a sequel follow-up to it. It was a big, because there was a huge gap between the actual last Leisure Suit Larry and then the new one. I think it's got a new developer and a bunch of other things. If you remember, which you may not, Vivendi of all people who ended up rolling into Activision are the people who used to publish the Leisure Suit Larry games.
Listen, my experience with these games is seeing them on the shelf at Blockbuster.
For a while, they actually had adult-only ratings.
Yeah.
Which is normally considered the death knell for a game. But if you make these games cheap enough, I guess it doesn't really matter. Like, can you imagine which it won't happen ever. Can you imagine Sony greenlighting a game that they know is going to be rated adult only? It just won't happen. Right. Sony would never do that because you're very limiting your audience, and I understand that to a degree. Weird thing that I ended up seeing because of that stream and never thought of because I didn't play the PS2 version. The PSP version of Siphon Filter Dark Mirror was rated M. The PS2 version was rated teen.
Weird.
Very weird. But apparently they scaled back some of the blood and some of the fire effects. Because remember in Dark Mirror how you could tase people and set them on fire?
Yeah.
Yeah. They kind of scaled back the way that
Which
looked.
is not how that works.
Oh no, not at all. Fun as hell in the game, absolutely.
Yes,
I love that game. I'm probably going to replay it soon too. I'm telling you, I've been having an itching to play some old games. By the way, Rob talked about Ben working on a new IP, and he thought Siphon Filter would be great too. I can almost guarantee you they're not making Siphon Filter. I would love it if so, because there's some great Siphon Filter games. But yeah, you know. John Garvin was talking about the reason they quit making them was because they had made like 7 of them. He's like, I was just done. I didn't really have anything else that I wanted to do with it. So interesting nonetheless. More crossover goodness is happening in the indie sphere as Curse of the Dead Gods brings the Curse of the Dead Cells update, letting players play new content inspired by Dead Cells, including iconic weapons, a new curse aptly called the Curse of the Headless, a new challenge room featuring Dead Cells' cursed chest, and more. The update is available now, so if you've not played that game and this pushes you towards it, there you go.
Hey, if anybody watches the video version of this, let us know if we're coming off sync a lot. I've noticed it 3 times now.
Oh.
Where, like, did you see it just there?
No, I guess I didn't.
Well, it was on my mouth when I was talking, but it was like my mouth opened and everything paused for like 1 second, and then it went off sync and then went right back. It's
the sync
weird.
is a little different on this TV because the input on the actual delay on this TV is worse than like my monitor.
It's not delay like that. It looks like we're getting off sync, and it's happened a couple of times because I monitor our video a lot.
Let us know how stupid we look.
Yeah.
Next thing up, Subnautica Below Zero received a new cinematic trailer giving us a look into the sequel's Frozen Tundra before it releases next month on May 14th. Saul often talks about Subnautica being like his big fear game.
Yep.
Did you see the trailer for this?
Nope. You know what's weird is I'm downloading it on PS5, and I was curious to see if there's any PS5 updates to the game, which is not, but inherently it has better load times because it takes about 5 minutes to load into the world.
Whoa!
Even on PS5, it still takes like 3 something. But it still has bugs and problems. So it's just always a curious question. Why are you making a sequel if the first game's still broken?
Money to go back and fix a game versus to do a new one. I mean, it's always that balance, I think.
Yeah. That's what a lot of the community is kind of pissed off at them. Just because of that.
The argument is, do you do a better job at fixing those bugs in a new game and not having to waste? Because if it did well enough to warrant a sequel, but there's still some problems going back, it's kind of just it's one of those things where small teams have that problem more. Now, a big question for a lot of people, just while we're on topic of that, do you remember that the Steam version of Nier Automata is like super broken?
Yeah, launch it was, right?
Okay, it still is.
Okay.
Now here's the crazy part. The version that came out to Game Pass on PC and the Epic Game Store version, I think, maybe. I know it's for sure the Microsoft version is not broken. Does not have the same problems, but it's a PC release. So people are like, why is the PC version for Xbox fine and you've still done nothing for the Steam version? And it got such a big outcry that people legitimately had to go in and or that Square had to come back and say, we're going to fix the Steam version finally. But the weird part about that is that that's a game that sold well over 5 million copies. Why would you not take the budget to go back and be like, hey, we're going to make the actual PC version of this game work instead of just building an entirely new version of the PC one?
I think the difference with that, though, is that this game was in early access for so long and then officially launched like less than 2 years ago. It was like a year ago, wasn't it? Like a year and a half ago, maybe?
I want to say 2, sounds right. But it was in early access for a lot longer before that.
Yeah.
Either way, sequel's coming, and hopefully they don't have the same problems.
Right.
That's really what it comes down to. Always with that, like, one of the big things about Days Gone that was impressive is that Sony did support the game. They wanted to make sure that the game was in a playable state for everybody.
And that's always...
Which I will tell you, if you are interested in game development at all, and just weird things about how decisions are made and things that go down, both of the John Garvin and Jeff Ross interviews with Jaffe are super interesting. They're really fun to watch. They bring up a lot of things about that game and different things. One of the things being that they actually didn't know how broken the game was going to be for people because apparently it was a system-by-system basis. He was saying that they had a base PS4 running the game basically flawlessly. Maybe the occasional hiccup for frame rate or something, but not the issues that some people had where like falling through the level or whatever. And he said that when they sent it out to reviewers is when that first became a thing because some reviewers could play the whole game with very little issue and some reviewers were having massive issues day one. He said the problem was is that they weren't easily replicable. It's almost like you needed to have the machine it happened on to understand why. So what they did is they went back and just made a decision to break the game up into smaller data chunks so that it would seek and stream differently, so that even the worst PS4, be it dust involved in it or different hardware inside as little revisions are made, can run perfectly. And that kind of stuff is really interesting, but only if I guess you're really into the way that game design works, because it's crazy to think that the game was working perfectly for them and not for other people. So is what it is. PS5 owners may have noticed an update for their DualSense this past week, and it appears that the update has made the controller's vibrations and more pop. You almost got me, Saul. When playing PS4 games through backward compatibility. By nature of the difference of the tech driving the vibration, DualSense has to use haptic motors, if you remember, to basically replicate the old rumble motors that were in the DualShock 4. So now when you're playing these games, PS4 games specifically, you'll notice people were talking about the Ratchet and Clank reboot, playing it, and that before this update happened, it was kind of really weak, and now it's really responsive. That's one of those cool things about when tech moves over. You're trying to replicate old things. This is basically emulation of vibration through a completely different vibration method.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not perfect day one because you just got to do what you can. Now, here's something that I want to bring up. This was not in the patch notes anywhere. And this has happened so many times with Sony where they introduce features and they just don't put them in the patch notes at all. And they just want people to randomly figure it out. And I've never understood that. And this goes to talk about a lot of things. Sony right now has probably had two of the worst PR weeks for them, at least in the big gaming internet, or the gaming internet sphere. And they have not said a word. Sony just does not talk about anything ever. And I know, like they were talking, there's always that viewpoint. We've even said it ourselves. Let the things that you do speak for themselves. The PS5 spoke for itself. The games that are coming out on PS5 speak for themselves. Yeah, that's true. But dude, when you have Xbox and all these other companies being super on the nose, being like, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, this is what we want to do. Oh, you didn't like this. This is the way we feel about it, and this is what we're going to do to fix it. Sony doesn't talk, and sometimes it's the right choice, because I do think that sometimes people are upset about something that doesn't matter, and maybe the argument exists that the Days Gone stuff doesn't matter. But it is kind of like sometimes by commenting, you're starting a conversation you can't win.
Yeah,
like you're always gonna be losing no matter what you say, and maybe that's the way it goes. But why on something as simple as just being like, oh, by the way, now your controller on PS4 games will vibrate more realistically to the DualShock 4? Just tell us that. What the hell, dude?
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's kind of fun, I guess, but it's not.
It is, but only for people who are actually going to bother looking at the news or screwing around on their system.
Yeah.
Because the only reason that you know these things is because either you experience them, like this is at least pretty easy to experience, and be like, wow, this feels different than it did last week.
Also, I rolled my eyes when I turned my PS5 on to see that I have to connect a USB-C
Why
cable.
can that not be done wirelessly?
Yeah.
That feels so weird.
I was like, okay, I don't have a cable for that right now because I don't have, I charge it via my dock.
Data can be transferred over Bluetooth. These are Bluetooth controllers. Send the damn data package.
Didn't the Xbox initially update to where you could do it wirelessly?
I don't know. Day one, because it's been so long. Day one, you could not. I don't remember now. I'll probably look and see. It's been so long since there's been one. I don't know if you have to plug it in or not. But
also, I just want to
Bluetooth. Come on, guys.
I want to butt in before we get to the last thing. I'm gonna go wild today. I'm gonna try Hawaiian pizza for the first time.
Bro, let's do this.
I'm gonna put jalapenos on it too, though. Make it spicy, sweet, and salty.
Okay.
You never tried Hawaiian pizza?
I've never tried Hawaiian pizza.
I have a long time ago.
Is it good? Y'all like it? So we're team Hawaiian.
Oh, I mean, I don't remember, if I'm being dead honest.
Okay.
I don't like pineapple all that much, so I want to say I also don't like Canadian bacon all that much. So I feel like Hawaiian pizza across the board, I don't like it by itself.
Oh.
Like if it's in like a big meat pizza, that's fine.
Who orders Canadian bacon pizzas with only Canadian bacon?
You would
Answer
be surprised.
this in the comments.
You
or
would
Discord.
be surprised.
Also, while we're on top of pizza, I want to have a fun little thing we could do. Pizza Hut only. Only Pizza Hut. Or only things applicable at Pizza Hut.
Buy us Pizza Hut.
Hit us up in Discord with your favorite wild. And I don't want somebody like, oh yeah, I get like ham and turkey. I want a wild pizza topping combination. I want some like, you use a barbecue sauce as the sauce. You put all kinds of other toppings on there. What is your favorite custom pizza? And we're going to make them.
We're going to do so. Yeah. First of all, we always do this when we get together. So if you send us those, we will record it. We will bring the pizzas in here. We'll record us taste testing them.
You know what could be even more fun? live on Twitch, right? Blindfold test. And then you got to figure out, you got to give us a name of a list of the people who made it. We have to guess out of which one of our Discord people made this pizza.
Okay. That would be fun. Let us know how you think about that. But that would be fun because we already do pizza. Why not have some extra fun with it?
I'm going to be honest here. Let's blow through this last part because
this last one is
nobody cares about Cyberpunk.
Despite the controversy surrounding Cyberpunk 2077, and I think the reason I even put this in here is I think it speaks to the episode as a whole, which is always something we've said a few times. The greater gaming market is so different, and I would argue the core gaming market is disconnected from the majority of the gaming market is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that we're always wrong or they're always right or anything like that. But despite the controversy surrounding Cyberpunk 2077 across gaming communities on social media, CDProjektRed posted record sales revenues of $562 million, more than 4 times what the company reported in 2019 and more than 2.5 times their previous record of $210 million in 2015 alongside the launch of Witcher 3. A bottom line record was also set with a net profit of $303 million, again, more than tripling the 2015 record of $89.8 million. All this from Cyberpunk, a game that released in December and had a very limited time on the market to make these gains when compared to The Witcher 3, which released in May of 2015 and had months and months to sell to make the numbers that they got that year. That's a big thing because I think a lot of people, if you look at gaming media and social media around gaming, you would have thought that CDProjektRed was in trouble right now. And it turns out the reality is no. This game, even without being on the PS store, is still sold well enough that they've made more money than they've ever made.
So I think that there's a good reason behind this, and that's because people with high-end PCs didn't have problems with this game as much.
And Stadia got, surprisingly, Cyberpunk was a big Stadia game.
Who was it that was just talking to us about Stadia?
Rob Henry.
Yeah, okay.
And he actually said he got the one with Cyberpunk. And I know a lot of people said if you don't have the money, and definitely right now, it's hard to build a big gaming PC that's powerful. If you don't have it, the next best thing was Stadia.
That makes sense because it
was stable and it had a lot of the graphical features, not all of them, but a lot of them.
I wonder if Stadia has DSLL.
I don't know actually. It would make sense if it did. I think that Stadia didn't have ray tracing. It may now, but it didn't at launch for sure. So, I
don't think
either way, it's interesting to say. This game did really well. Now, if you remember, I want to say that this game, before it even released, had 8 million pre-orders.
Which is wild.
That's huge. Man, is that huge. And I know that the budget for Cyberpunk was probably big. How big? It's hard to say. It's cheaper to make games in certain areas. This is a smaller team, a smaller studio in all reality. Because I'm sure that some people would say record sales of $562 million doesn't sound like a lot. That's a lot of money in a single year, when I wouldn't be surprised if the overall budget of Cyberpunk was less than $200 million. And it's probably, I would really be curious to see what the budget is. We'll probably never know. But with them being a smaller place and the way they are, it wouldn't surprise me if the budget was even closer to $100 million, which some of these big games like The Last of Us 2, from what people are saying, people in the industry who have some connections, they're hearing up to about $200 million for a game, which is a lot of money.
Yeah. It's crazy, but like at the same time, I think that the core group of gamers, that sounds so cringy to just say, but the core group of gamers who are in and out of news all day, every day, who are putting in 40 hours of games every 2 weeks or so, I think that's where, like what Brett was saying, is how it is kind of disconnected. But at the same time, I think that's the most important ones, because typically, and this could be a community's take one day, since we already have this, but I'm curious, does a game get fixed because the core gamers or because the casual gamers?
It really is the argument.
Because you would think a casual gamer would either accept the game for the bugs or not play it.
Yeah,
because casual gamers don't care.
They're not in the news the same
about
way.
30 versus 60 or frame rate drops or.
You know what I think it probably is? The answer is probably that it's somewhere in the middle, but what's the heavier split?
Yeah, what's the split
what's the
there?
60-40 or 70-30? What is it?
Yeah.
And is it more heavily leaned towards the casuals because you want them to see your name and be like, oh, the next game will be, even better. Because, like, you have just as much reason to satiate the people who are yelling at you potentially or just vocally complaining that there's an issue. You have a reason to want to fix the game for them. But even more so, you have a reason to want to look at the guy who just went to the shelf and saw Days Gone. This looks cool. I don't know really much about it, but you know what? Screw it. I'm going to try it out. Yeah. Oh, it's got a motorcycle. That's cool. I love Sons of Anarchy. I want to play this.
I love Ride to Retribution or Ride to Hell.
Retribution, Ride to Hell.
Yeah.
Ride to Hell, Retribution. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the people who are like that, if they get it day one and it's kind of busted up and they're having issues, and then you patch it, and then they're suddenly like, oh, the game works and I'm having a good time with it, they have more reason to see a Days Gone 2 or maybe recognize Ben, the studio, and then be like, I really like Days Gone and they fixed that game. I have more faith in them putting out a better game next time. But I don't know, man. That's really a good question. I would wonder the studies on all these different things, if they could even put one out there about what the difference would be.
Oh, man. Well,
are you looking at Ride to Hell Retribution's Metacritic?
Yeah. Just y'all go read some of the reviews on there.
Can we take a quick second too?
I can't read it out loud.
I'm curious your thoughts on this.
Okay.
I am starting to question the value of Metacritic.
Absolutely. Like the whole point of Metacritic is to go there and look at how nonsensical some of the people's writing reviews are and leave.
Even if you look at its real thing, right? The point of being an aggregate. Well, the point of being an aggregate is weird because if people just go to Metacritic and look at it, the problem is that people who make bogus reviews, even real journalists who are Metacritic certified or whatever, will still make reviews that I think are ultimately bogus or not completely true to what the game is. You have all these things, and it can really impact the aggregate, and then people will look at it and say, Days Gone has an aggregate of, 72 or
76,
something?
76, I thought.
It might be 76, but it's in the 70s. And they'll go, well, maybe it's not really worth my money. Well, the problem is when you have, and I'm not joking here, when you have reviewers who are saying, another straight white male, and of course, as a straight white male, I'm not trying to complain on that. What I mean is, I don't know what that review has to do with anything. It doesn't have to do with the game. You're looking at this and you're trying to apply these things that don't really completely go anywhere, and you're also doing an unfair argument, because the reality of it is, if you have a review that says, here's a game with another straight white male, and it's whitewashed, that means that, first of all, you didn't get far enough in the game. And could you say arguably, yeah, you want to try and be more diverse early on? Sure. But the reality is if you beat that game, which I think is a good argument to the fact that the reviewers didn't beat the game, you get to a bunch of different people. You get to Ricky. You get to, and I don't remember every one of their names, to be honest.
They're all straight white males.
Quite a while.
Spoiler alert.
But no, don't get me wrong. There is a lot of white people in the game. Okay, and I really liked what John Garvin said in his interview. He said, it wasn't a conscious thing so much as you write what you know. He's like, and what I know is the experience of being a white man. He goes, it wasn't purposeful as much as it just kind of happened. But at the same time, we have women who are of Hispanic descent. There's a lesbian relationship in that game. There's a black military leader in that game. So these things happen. So what are you doing there, buddy?
I'm hiding from the rage that you're going to get.
Oh, hey, send all the rage you want to. But my point being is I think that the reviews are not accurate to the game. Even if you didn't like the game, I think that's fine. But if your review is based upon that, then that seems weird. That doesn't really seem accurate to anything. There's a point in the game where Deacon does an apprehensible thing, but by the end of the game, it's clear that he is not the same guy who would make that decision and thinks differently about it. I just think that looking at a game from that standpoint doesn't mean that these reviews are accurate. So what does Metacritic really gain? Because if the score is going down because of bogus reviews of people who maybe didn't even finish the game, what is the value? I think it makes more sense for people to just look at their own places and say, this is a reviewer I like and I tend to agree with him and he lines up with me, and I can get the real thoughts from him and it be about the game, and okay, I'm going to make my decision based off of this. Then it does looking at an aggregate and never reading any of the reviews so much as just looking at a total score. And I think part of the reason that goes towards my argument there is oftentimes games like this have very drastically different user scores. The user score for Days Gone, I think, is in the 80s.
It's something. It is a difference. I don't like Metacritic, though, just for the fact of what it is. Like, for me, I prefer to get to know a reviewer.
So Metacritic right now,
it's going down 2 points. It was 73.
Okay, either way, it's 71. It's 71 right now. It's got a user score of 8.3. That's a pretty big difference. And I think that I think this game getting a critical, which also I think reviewers as a whole are somewhat disconnected from even core gamers like us. I don't personally think that reviewers quite nailed this game, partially because they played a game that was broken at launch, and that's a strong argument. But
and I think that in terms of game reviews, that there has to be a change to the format in terms of updated game reviews, and in that is that IGN actually does this, and it does it pretty well.
Updates their game review.
Well, it's review in progress, and it's
and
it's for games as a service or stuff like this. They put their initial thoughts out of how this game is, and then they'll eventually update it into the game's lifespan.
Yeah,
which for games as a service makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But sometimes with games like this and No Man's Sky, needs it as well.
Well, see, because I'd argue, like, right, if this game was either broken or so broken that you needed to wait and get the new review patch that they sent out to everyone that was better, and that's what you needed to finish it, you shouldn't have put out a review day one. And I know that that's hard because you're fighting for everyone's clicks.
It's impossible for websites, yeah.
But to some degree, I feel like that's how you do it. What you do is, hey, initial feelings of the game, this is what it is, based off of my current experience. There's a patch coming that's supposed to fix the problem I'm having.
That there's a patch coming, though, which I'm not sure if day one people knew.
Reviewers did. And actually, Jeff Ross talked about it. They sent out new code and asked people to play it before they actually put the review out, but they can't control that. And that's the reality. But I think the responsible way to handle this is say, right now, if you're worried about the game day one, maybe don't buy it because what my current experience is this. We can't have a full review of the full, the closest day one patch right now, but this is my current thoughts, and we're going to update it once we played a little bit more, or once I finished it. If you're saying I've played 8 hours of the game, but I can't finish it due to a game-breaking bug or due to game-breaking performance issues, I will come back to it and finish it up. Now, there's a ton of things. The reality of that's hard. There's other games that need to be reviewed, and you need to go on, and you can't constantly spend time replaying a game just because it was broken. But it goes back to my point of I think Metacritic's importance is even within the industry itself is over relied on.
It's that way for everything too. Just the same for movies, like Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
But here's what I would recommend everybody do. This is my preferred way for reviews for games. Find a reviewer that you vibe with and that has similar opinions to you in terms of what they look for in games. Once you find them, if you need a review, go to them. If they mention problems with a game, then go cast a wide net on the user side, not critic side, the user side of Metacritic, just to see how widespread these problems really are. Sometimes with games, Days Gone is a great example. Some people have problems, some people don't. But then with the user score, you're going to have to weed through crap like, oh, this game's not coming to Wii U, 0 kind of reviews. But you're going to get good reviews in there from there are users who literally they spend a part-time job for just a hobby writing user scores.
Dude, some user reviews are better than real reviews.
Yes.
I mean, even written. Like, I'm like, wow, this guy should be an actual writer because this is so much better written.
Honestly, they do that too, probably to get a good portfolio up for when they want to go work for something like GameSpot or IGN. But anyways, I'm hungry. We're going to go get pizza. You guys...
Our community's take.
Yeah, wait, hold on.
I just want to make sure that you're bringing it back up.
You guys can find us across a good old different little bits of social media. You can go to Twitter at triangle SQRD. You can find our Discord in the link description. We have a Facebook page called Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. It's a group you can ask to be in, and we allow everybody to join in. As well as our YouTube channel that you guys are either watching this on or podcast services. Across all podcast services, that if you find us, great. If that place has a review system or a rate system, please give us a review or rating that you feel was necessary. I don't care if it's a like or dislike. Same goes for YouTube. And we like to get involved with our community, and we do that through Community's Take. And this week, we are going to steal Rude Days' a great guy. And he is, just to kind of reiterate that, he's asking, were you a PlayStation gamer at the time of the 2011 hack? It's 10 years old now. He wants to know, how did it affect your day-to-day habits? Did it affect your confidence in the brand of PlayStation or Sony? And did you feel if they did a good enough job responding to the situation and making it up to the users? On the flip side, if you weren't a PlayStation fan, or if you did not have a PlayStation at the time, did you know that it was happening? I'm sure you did, but did you think about it when you decided to delve deep into the PlayStation family? I have some thoughts on that I'll share next week, and I hope to hear all y'all's as well. And last and not least, this show is brought to you guys by us and, of course, all of you great Patreon people who like to support the show. As I mentioned earlier, podcasting has a lot of hidden costs and fees into it that you don't really think about. RSS feeds, equipment upkeep, light upkeep, camera upkeep, all kinds of stuff that you don't really realize is going to be a money hole when you first start it. And with the helps of you guys, and other things in the world, that's what really helps us keeps us going. So I wanted to send a special thank you out to all of our patrons. I know Brett loves them all. As a matter of fact, Brett, every episode, at the end of every episode, we'll say your name, and we're gonna go eat pizza. I'm not gonna let you guys forget though. If you hit us up with some Pizza Hut combinations, or pizza or Domino's combinations, anything you could do at Domino's. But this has been episode 208 of Triangle Squared, a PlayStation podcast. We'll see you guys back for episode 209. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. And a huge shout out to our patrons, Kyle Grimm, Josh Jarrell, Matthew Green, my name is Dan, Luke Bartolomeo, Sean Sanderud, Funk Turkey, Danny Villalobos, Corey Hickerson, Blake Popst, Kevin Baconbits, Mark Schutz, Shadowist, Steven Salazar, The Stonard, Rich, Constantly Kenny, Solitary Red, Chris Figs, Zachary Sawyer, Landis, Rude Days 93, Josh Drago, Bailey Robertson, a new patron this month, thank you Bailey, Brian, Donovan Williams, Derek Porter, Josh Ayers, Joshua Lago, Sean One Neo, Tyler Powers, El Chabib, Rob Warp Point, Richard Schaefer, and our new other one this month, Ham and Egger. Thanks, guys. And again, head over to patreon.com/Nartech if you want to join your fellow people here on this great patronage.